Okay. Awesome. All right, I'll give folks a couple more minutes. As we start trickling in here, just a reminder that we have a very packed agenda for tonight. We have 11 candidates, which is super great that everyone is able to join. And we're hearing from folks for Congressional District 10, Congressional District 11, Senate District 22, and Senate District 22 and Senate District 23. I figured people might want to look at what the actual districts are. So I pulled up a map here. I'll drop it in the chat. You can go ahead and click through and see the actual districts that we're discussing, since the lines are quite different than what we expected. And even the lines that were drawn for the beginning of the year are not the same as what we have today and what will hopefully be what we'll be endorsing for tonight. So that's why we are sort of doubling back on a couple of congressional offices since our endorsements in districts that no longer overlap with the 52nd Assembly District. We still like them, they're great, but we like to make sure we have our endorsements and carry petitions for the folks that touch the 52nd Assembly District. So that's why we're making additional congressional endorsements, and we're joined tonight by our congressman, who is now my congressman here in Prospect Heights, but we will get to him in just a few minutes. Also, a heads up while we have a couple of moments before we dive into all of these candidates from different districts and Senate offices, petitioning is right around the corner, supposedly. So there is a lot of back and forth and a lot of unknowns at the moment. And I'm sure some folks on this call are very close to this as well. Our sort of petitioning point people for IND running our operations here are our own Joan Millman. So thank you for leading at the helm of that, as well as Susanna, who I'm not sure is on the line yet, but they've been helping to coordinate what will be a massive petitioning effort, because not only do we have the candidates that we'll endorse tonight, but they have the candidates that we've endorsed the last 2 endorsement meetings. So I believe 21 races total. And that's not even including the 375 county committee seats or so that IND will also be proudly petitioning for. So lots to do. When I say in the emails we have to hit the ground running, we are not kidding. Petitioning does allegedly begin on March 1st. So we might even be connecting this weekend to do labels and petition printing and a whole bunch of stuff, but we pride ourselves on being the first club on the ground. So we're organizing around that date of March 1st, but it might be pushed back. I'm sure we can get into the details of that soon. Any questions before I toss it over to our first candidate that's here with us?
Alyssa, can you remind everybody to please put their first and last name into the square that they are showing in, because just the first name or the name of somebody's iPad does not help me to take attendance. So if you want your attendance to be reflected, please change your name so that it shows that you're here.
And also, if you want to receive your ballot, same goes for that. So yes, please use your real names.
Yes, thank you. And for those of you who are wondering, how do I update my name? You can just hover over your square and click the 3 dots on the upper right-hand corner and rename yourself there. And if you're having trouble, just use the chat box to, I suppose, announce yourself if that's helpful as well. And all throughout, feel free to drop comments in the chat. I know Zoom is getting tedious after almost 2 years of these Zoom meetings, so we like to mimic the feel of an in-person meeting. So feel free to chat and ask questions. And please do raise your hand. I have some questions prepared for all of our candidates, but we like to hear from more voices than just mine. Okay, getting a good quorum here. Let's see. Any other reminders? I should remind everyone that we believe in respectful dialogue, so please keep good intentions and be respectful of open debate as we head into these candidate interviews as well. And a reminder of what constitutes good standing here at IND is you have to be a dues paying member. And if you're new, you have to have attended at least 2 meetings to receive your ballot. If you've been a member for a long time, can pay your, just make sure to pay your dues and we'll make sure to get you a ballot. And for those of you who joined late, I started the meeting by apologizing to all people with the last names A through F because I did not send you your sample ballot. Hopefully I course corrected and you got your sample ballot this afternoon. And if you still have questions about if you are eligible to vote tonight, please reach out to me in the chat or Danielle or anyone. We will get it figured out. Okay, I am already behind schedule. I apologize, but we are going to jump right into our first candidate of the evening. Ashmi, are you here? If you are, please. Hey, Ashmi. Great. So go ahead and unmute yourself and spend about 3 minutes introducing yourself to the club, and then we'll go into questions and answers. And I'm going to try to enforce time, even though I already went over on my time, but so go ahead. Welcome to IND.
Thank you. My name is Ashmi Sheth. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm a first-generation American. I gave up my role regulating big banks at the Federal Reserve to run for Congress for New York's 10th district. I'm a person with a disability, a progressive, a climate activist, running because we face an affordability crisis in urban environments today, and we need the strength and the vision to alleviate our poor quality of life. So fundamentally, the way our campaign has been built is different. It's not politics as usual. In the current system, we have a model where the constituent will have a concern and they'll have to go meet the leader where they're at. And in our model, what we did is we flipped the narrative. We asked thousands of people in our district before I even launched our campaign 11 months ago, what are issues most important to you? And what do you want to see at the table? And so our policy is community-built policy. I encourage you to all check it out while I'm speaking at ashmiforcongress.com. And so really it's about people with the lived experiences writing our policy platform with us. We had about 15,000 people help us write this before we launched our campaign. And we know that a stronger model of democracy is one we have representative politics and participatory governance. And so it's centered on meeting people where they're at. Since the launch of our campaign, our team has knocked over 40,000 doors. We've actively checked to see if voters are registered and engaged, if they know about their voting rights, dates, and deadlines. And I know this is work that's really crucial to this club. And we've also asked what are issues most important to them. And so we built a team with AOC's former field director, Cori Bush's former campaign manager, Jamal Bowman's former team. We've had over 1,000 individual donors donate to the campaign. So we are serious and we're here and we have the energy. My priorities are to build a 21st century government, fight for equal opportunity for all, and strive for economic justice. And within 21st century governance, it's expanding the Green New Deal. It's reimagining healthy living in cities, whether it's sanitation or urban parks. It's tackling greenwashing and making sure that our Fortune 500 companies are held accountable. It's paying our teachers more and really encouraging digital and financial literacy. I know that's really personal to me with parents who are paying credit card debt with credit card debt and then moving forward as a financial regulator. Around equal opportunity for all, as I've mentioned, voting rights are extremely paramount to this campaign, but it's also about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. As a person with a disability, I know that people with disabilities and minorities are often not at the table, and it's important for us to make sure that we run and have a voice and a seat. It's also about gender justice, talking about menstrual equity, survivor-centered institutions. I am a survivor of domestic violence, and I believe that we need to be speaking more about these issues at hand. And it's also about stronger enforcement and regulation of gerrymandering and enforcement on dark money. And the last section is economic justice. Our district is the most economically unequal in the entire country. That takes systems and decades of power that have created this. And so it's important for us to really cancel student debt, expand our climate finance, and that's 2 areas that I'd work on. And our team brings new ideas to the table, a vision for the 21st century. I believe in ideas such as summer programs for all, or replacing pills with vegetables. And we have so many different programs that we learn on a federal level that we can expand and grow. So I hope you consider an endorsement for me. I am a community organizer and I really respect your work. So thank you so much for your time. I stand before you against all odds. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashmi. And I apologize, I didn't say what office you were running for. You're my first candidate, so guinea pig a little bit. But you are seeking the 10th Congressional District, which is now much more of the 52nd Assembly District, and then all the way up to the west side. So thank you for sticking to time also. All right, let's open it up for questions. Feel free to raise your hand with the raise hand button and or ask questions in the chat if you aren't able to unmute. So any questions to start us off? I can open up with one, but again, all the members to be able to ask questions. So you talked a lot about a lot of different areas that you want to work on. So if elected, which committees would you be hoping to have a seat on?
Absolutely. It would be around financial services. As a former regulator, I believe that we have a larger role and responsibility to take on regulating not only the big banks, but talking about how are our 401ks invested? How do we truly divest from big oil and gas and the fossil fuel industry? How do we make sure that people feel financially secure and know their rights and are able to have equal access to credit? And so it would really start there.
Great. Awesome. Lynn Hill, go ahead.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit specifically about why you think the incumbent should not be reelected?
Yes, absolutely. As we've door knocked and we've had a really strong grassroots movement, we've found that constituents feel as though the incumbent has been absent from conversations that are happening today. Through the COVID pandemic, we've seen, an extreme sense of loneliness, small businesses that are shattering, financial crisis. And when we've personally called the incumbent's office or we've worked with small businesses on the ground, hundreds of them, to seek relief, we don't even have, no one picks up the phone. And so the first step was for us is, we feel like there isn't as much engaged leadership as there once was. The second area is, where does the incumbent receive funding from, and how are we thinking about modernizing the way government is built? And so he does receive money from corporate PACs, from big donors that are developers, and we are purely grassroots. I take only individual contributions on our campaign. As I mentioned, we have over 1,000. And in regards to policy and the history of policy, Representative Nadler has voted on issues in the past and then changed his perception of those issues, whether it's on LGBTQ rights, whether it's on surveillance for people of color. And so those are areas that we've really focused on. I think predominantly it's the way that we're running our campaign is just fundamentally different. It's when we're door knocking, we're talking with every single voter on the ground, and we have the energy and the resources to do this because people believe that we need some change now. We need to think about our next 2, 5, 10, 20 years. We don't, have someone with that vision as of today.
Thank you. One last question, since we are running behind. Howard, can you make it a quick question?
Sure. Do you support the BDS movement?
I'd rather not talk about BDS, but I do believe I've seen the occupation myself. I've also worked in Israel on several different policy issues. And so I do say that, in terms of OECD funding, I think that we should reduce the amount of funding that we get. Parents from India and seeing the global South right now experiencing massive climate disaster, I do think we should start thinking about foreign aid. My partner works at the Department of State, and we always see, how funding is allotted across the country, across the world, and there is a lot of room to think about other countries that are experiencing humanitarian crises and allotting more funding there.
Well, given that we're pressed for time, I won't ask you to answer the question again.
Thank you. I appreciate that, just for timekeeping purposes. But thank you, Ashmi. Appreciate you joining us tonight. And folks will be able to rank choice the Congressional District 10 votes, and Ashley will appear on our ballot. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. And next, and apologies, we're going to be switching back and forth between offices, but wanted to be respectful of everyone's scheduling tonight. So we are jumping over to Senate District, New York State Senate District 23, formerly the seat of Diane Savino. So the mostly Staten Island seat that covered some of Southern Brooklyn. And now it comes up through a lot of the 52nd Assembly District. So starting off this race, and again, if you scroll up, you can see the new maps that I dropped in the chat as well, if you're curious where the districts are exactly. So switching over to our first candidate of that race for tonight, Jessica Scarella-Spanton. I see you're here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll give you about 3 minutes to introduce yourself and save the rest of the time for Q&A. So go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for meeting with me tonight. My name is Jessica Scarella-Spanton. I'm going to be running for this new Senate seat. I've spoken to a lot of you just to introduce myself, and I want to say to everybody on here, I know it's probably strange to suddenly be connected to Staten Island. I can only imagine. I know it's a funky looking district, but I really want to do my best to get out to this new area, have you get to know me. I want to get to know you and learn the issues that are really important to you. Just to tell you all a little bit about myself, I am a lifelong Staten Islander. I have 2 children, Emily and Jack. My husband and I were in Colorado for a couple of years. He was stationed, he was in the military. He was in Afghanistan for 2 tours while we were out there, and we decided to come back and settle down here on Staten Island. I've worked in government pretty much my whole career. I worked for Senator Diane Savino for 4.5 years. I worked for the party for some years, and I also worked in the New York State Assembly. What really got my passion kind of kicked off for government was when I was working for the New York State Assembly years ago. A lot of the issues I care about, and you'll learn this as you learn more about me, are centered around women and children. The first bill that I ever worked on was a family had approached me. They had a stillborn child, and one of the things that they were trying to do was get some sort of certificate to recognize the birth of the child. I worked with those families, and we were able to get over 148 sponsors in the assembly and got it passed into law. Ever since then, I've never forgotten that. I like to take action on things. I like to get things done. And that's what I brought with me when I went over to the senator's office. I did much more in the beginning of my career. I focused more on legislative issues. While I was working for the senator, I was much more district focused. During the pandemic was really when some of the most work that we did. We scheduled over 1,000 vaccines across both sides of the district, and we did a ton of unemployment cases. And yeah, I know it'll be quite an interesting journey to be connected to Staten Island, but I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to get to know your issues, and I'm here for all your questions.
Awesome. And ended before time. Much
I
appreciated.
tried. I saw the 1 minute and I was like, let me stop.
Yeah, thank you to Danielle for being a good timekeeper. Let's open it up for questions. Hal, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. You worked for Senator Savino, right?
Yes, I did.
I don't know if you know much about IND's history, but a few years back, we had a major campaign to elect Zellner Myrie to the state Senate, mainly because what's his name? Hamilton. I forget the name. Jesse,
Yeah.
Right, was a member of the IDS.
IDC.
Senator Savino, I believe, was a member of the IDS. So I'd like to know how you feel about this. You're working for a senator that unfortunately was part of a group that kept the Senate out of Democratic Party control for many years. Can you talk about that, please?
Yes, I'm happy you asked this. I'm happy this is my first question because I know it's the elephant in the room sometimes. Zellner is a great friend. I love Zellner, and I'm so happy to see him as senator. We were delegates together years ago in 2012 for Obama, so I'm happy for Zellner. Actually, I came in towards the tail end of the IDC, and I did most of her district office work. So working in my community is very important to me. I always will be a part of the Senate majority. That's always will be my plan. And as a matter of fact, I worked really hard to build relationships with the more progressive side of the people within our district. The person who ran against Senator Savino in 2018, Jasmine Robinson, is actually endorsing me for Senate. So, you know, we've worked really hard to try to bridge those gaps. And I was always kind of the person in between the more progressive groups and the senator. And I've really built really close relationships with them, which is, I think, a testament to why her 2018 opponent is supporting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Hopefully there's more. Yes, Susanna, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? Good to have you here. I just have a couple of questions about, could you maybe go through a couple of your priority bills, or there's so much talk about a lot of bills that should happen. So since this is your background, do you have any that you would really like to see passed this year, and a couple that you're going to make your priority next year? And if you have other priorities you want to talk about, that's fine too, but would love to just have a little more sense of your policy background. And then just if there's any particular issues or projects yet you're going to be focusing on in Brooklyn. We know these districts are pretty new, and a lot of you are just digging in, but just wondering if is there anything that you're aware of right now that you're going to be working to learn more about or help the community with in the Brooklyn area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will speak to, I think, what is the most important issue to every person in this room, which is the BQE promenade issue. So the first bill I would sign on to, and that I would hope would pass even before that, is the one that Assemblymember Simon and Senator Kavanaugh have sponsored to create an authority over that project. You know, I think it's going to take, it needs attention. It's a really difficult issue. I won't pretend to be an expert on it by any means. But I do know that it's one of the most important issues in this district. So I would make sure that we're working closely with the city administration. I think it would be great to have an independent authority overseeing it. And I want to listen to the concerns of the community. So that's the first one. And that's one of the biggest projects, I think, and challenges that we're going to face in this new part of the district. The second thing, I guess, bill that I want to work on, it's a bill that Senator Svino has worked on. She actually was able to expand IVF. I've worked with her as well on it, to expand IVF coverage. It wasn't covered by many health insurance companies. Infertility, I know I have a lot of friends who go through this. It's a fortune. It's a horrible thing that people have to go through. And right now, you only will be covered for IVF if you're deemed medically infertile. I have a lot of friends, two of my very close friends, they're a same-sex couple, and their IVF wasn't covered. So because the medical condition of infertility was not, she didn't fit the bill, basically. And I think it's very inadvertently discriminatory. So one of the first things I would definitely make sure that I did was expand on that work and include the LGBT plus community to be covered for that. And the third bill that I would definitely look at is the universal childcare bill. As a mom of 2 kids, you know, I didn't work for the first few years because it didn't make sense for me to, you know, it didn't make sense for me to go to work every day and take my entire paycheck and put it into childcare. Then I was lucky enough to get a job where I had some built-in flexibility, but I know most people are not that lucky. And I think childcare is a huge issue. You know, people shouldn't be stagnant in their careers and lose their jobs because they're raising their family. So I think there's 2 in the Senate. I know one is by Senator Brisport, the other is by Senator Ramos, and I want to look really closely at both of those bills. Yeah, I would say those are my big issues here, and anything regarding strengthening workplace protections as well. I care. I'm a daughter of 2 teachers. You know, my family's all union, and I always want to make sure we're doing things in the interest of our labor unions as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have a time for one more question. I'm happy to steal it if nobody else raises their hand before I finish this sentence. So, okay, so since nobody, Joe Coletti, treasurer, go ahead. Good save. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Hi.
New district will be quite different, stretching from Staten Island and all the way to downtown Brooklyn, where I am. What do you see as the biggest difference between those two areas, and how would you work to overcome them?
Yep, of course. So of course there's huge differences, right? But I'm used to working among huge differences. So, the current district encompasses Staten Island, which can be a little more conservative leaning, and Coney Island. And they have very different needs, very different issues, but I was able to go into Coney Island and ingratiate myself into that community and, get to know their issues, get to know the people there. And I plan on doing the same exact thing in this new portion of the district. Clearly, again, I think there is the clear political ideologies, right? I think Staten Island does tend to be much more conservative. We have a bit more of a liberal pocket, a liberal democratic pocket. I think this new portion is much more progressive. But I think I know how to speak to the issues that matter to everybody, right? Like I said earlier, resiliency is super important. Everybody here knows somebody during Hurricane Ida who maybe had their basement flooded, or their car destroyed, or their business ruined because of flooding. So I want to work on resiliency issues. I want to kind of come up with things and areas in which we can kind of draw dots together here. I am a bit more liberal leaning than a lot of my counterparts on Staten Island, but I know Staten Island and I know how to talk to these voters. I have family that's extremely to the left. I have family that's extremely to the right, and I'm always there to kind of be the voice in between. And I'm not afraid to hash out issues with people, no matter what your political leaning is. But I can see that, being challenging, but I think I'm the right person to speak to those differences. I'm comfortable, talking to people who agree with me, disagree with me, whatever the case may be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I liked that Joe's Jeopardy background was going on.
I like that
as
too.
he was asking the question. Very fitting. That's great. Well, are there any more questions? We have can spare one more moment in the meantime. And while folks are thinking of their final question, just want to say hello to Judge Garson and Susan Quick and Senator Zelnor Myrie, who have joined us. Thank you so much for making an appearance here. Okay, so hearing none, thank you so much, Jessica, for introducing yourself to the club and sharing your story with us. So Jessica will appear on the ballot for the 23rd 23rd Senate District here in New York. And again, apologies for jumping back and forth between races, but we are going to switch gears and go to Congressional District 11, which was formerly held by Max Rose, who I believe is here with us, and is now held by Republican Representative Malliotakis. This is a very important district for national concerns as we hope to win back the House. Sorry, we have the House. Hope to remain in control of the House. Oh, it's going to be a long night, y'all. Okay, so Max, I believe you are here. Feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. We'll give a few minutes for introductory remarks, and then we'll switch gears and do some Q&A.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for taking the time. And Jessica, it's great to find you here as well, a fellow Staten Islander. I just want to start off really by thanking just IND and the whole team. In 2017, when we set out to run, to take back or to flip New York 11, it was not even listed on the top 75 seats in the country that could be flipped. There were a lot of rooms that I got laughed out of. There were a lot of folks who didn't pick up my calls. You all were not one of them. You really believed that we could do this. And in the process, over the course of that year and a half, we became the first Democratic team to unseat a Republican on Staten Island since World War II, pretty much. And more importantly than that, though, we flipped the House and we checked a president that had become or was extraordinarily unhinged and deserving of accountability. And what I pledged during my race was that I'm not going to listen to my donors, that I'm going to tell corporate PACs and lobbyists that they can keep their damn money, and and that I'm always going to follow our shared moral compass, not thinking about the next election. And when we were faced with the issue of whether or not to impeach Donald Trump when he severely stepped over the line, or when we were faced with the decision of whether to support a once-in-a-generation package centered around police reform and to march in support of racial justice, I did the right thing. And what a lot of people say in the aftermath, because when you win a race, everyone tells you it was great, it was perfect, there was nothing wrong. And when you lose a race, everyone's got an opinion about what happened. And certainly the general consensus is that it was for those reasons that I lost. But you know what? I'd do it again. It was the right thing to do. And now we're back in the fight, because the fight can't be over. Not when we haven't achieved universal childcare, not when there are still families in New York City and across the country trying to decide or having to decide whether or not to pay for prescription drugs or to put food on the table. Still, we have climate change that we have not developed a robust policy against, which has to include the overall target of achieving net carbon neutrality in the United States of America by 2035. And certainly not while we are still seeing endless wars in our society. So that's why I'm in this. Nicole Malliotakis, and I'll close out by saying this. Nicole Malliotakis, when she was faced with the choice on January 6th of whether to play politics and appeal to her base, or whether to do the right thing by the Constitution and uphold our democracy, she chose to appeal to a brazen base and to perpetuate the big lie. That for me was unforgivable. And that to me says everything that we all need to know about why she cannot hold this seat. And so what I do pledge to you all today is that whether or not I earn your support or whether or not I win the primary, what matters is that we win this general. And I'm 100% committed to supporting whoever is the nominee and to doing everything I can beside you all in the trenches to make sure we take this seat back. So thanks so much again for affording me this opportunity. And I really look forward to a great conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Max. Great, so again, feel free to raise your hand to ask a question. You can also chat in the box. And we had one question come in already. A member is wondering if you are sent back to Congress, would you rejoin the Problem Solvers Caucus if reelected?
And I've already said publicly, I'm not joining any caucuses right now. Certainly those centered around how the Democratic Party organizes itself. I'm proud of the endorsements that I've received thus far from Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Progressive Caucus, to certainly more moderate members of the Democratic Caucus. But I think that we actually have a problem in the Democratic Party right now of that we're siloing ourselves way too much within the party, and we need to be focusing on how to unify around really bold, significant policies and make sure that we protect the House and the Senate from the Republicans taking power. And so what I'm going to be focusing on is taking a step back, delivering from the district, and building really strong relationships within the caucus.
Great, thank you. Danielle, feel free to unmute yourself, ask away.
Hey, Max, thank you for coming.
Hey, Danielle, how are you?
Good. My question is there something that you would do differently this time around if you were elected?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am by no sense of the word perfect. And I learned a lot during my time in Congress. I learned a lot. This is now my third race. Some of the lessons that I've learned were really very public, which is an interesting way to learn lessons. So I think that and I mentioned this previously in what I was referring to, it is fine for people to voice their disagreements within a caucus, within a political party. There are certainly things that I disagree with that certain members of the Democratic Party agree with. But I think that we do have to make sure that our language and our rhetoric is always centered around uniting. The second thing, though, that I really, really want to make sure that we can do is, I started an End Corruption caucus with Katie Porter. And we had just stood it up about 4 months before COVID. And we were unable to really build it into a strong enough entity to make sure that we were advancing an anti-corruption agenda outside of HR 1. And I want to make sure that we don't make that mistake again, that we can build that into an even stronger body.
Great. Any other questions for former Congressman Max Rose from Staten Island? See, I again have my list of go-to questions. I'm curious, what would you need to accomplish in your next term to consider it a real success?
Well, first of all, in 2017, when we first ran, I led a letter of actually what ended up being 100 candidates demanding that an unprecedented pro-democracy and anti-corruption bill be the first bill that the Democratic Party puts on the floor. And that came to be known as HR 1. We got to get HR 1 passed. We have to get it through the Senate. It has to be signed by the President of the United States. And I really do not give a damn about the filibuster. What I care about is passing legislation like that. Certainly, as we've seen, what is hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars of funding passed over the course of the last few Congresses, I do want to make sure that we are getting as many resources back to the district as possible, so that particularly in and around infrastructure, as well as addressing climate change. What we're seeing really on the shore of the Northeast is the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind. And our district, New York 11, can be the center, the nation's center for offshore wind turbine assembly. And figuring out how we can be a part of that story, as well as continuing to have robust investments in our resiliency projects. I can't think of another congressional district that has more coastline than this. Will definitely be my top priorities.
Great. And judging by just how windy it is out today, I think I'd agree. Great. Thomas, I see your hand up. Feel free to unmute and ask away.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. And Max, your district has changed slightly in a way that has combined and different parts of the city and different views in the city. And I'm curious how you would approach those different constituencies and work to marry those interests.
Yeah, I think that there's, to include the New York Times recently, there's been a lot of attention paid to how the hell can Park Slope and the South Shore of Staten Island ever get along? Well, first of all, one thing is I do want this district. I'm not going to change what I believe. You all have heard some of my policy positions. I'm not going to change the fact that since the beginning of my time in public life, I've believed that skyrocketing wealth inequality is a massive problem, and taxing the ultra wealthy has got to be part and parcel of addressing that. That's why I led the legislation to eliminate the carried interest loophole, for instance. But what's fascinating, and you know Staten Island well, and certainly your family does, if you go to the South Shore of Staten Island, you talk about universal childcare. I think that there's a warm reception to that, just as you could in Carroll Gardens and Borum Hill and Park Slope. You talk about universal paid family and medical leave. You talk about the fact that it is not my belief that teachers and nurses and other civil servants should pay a higher tax rate than the ultra wealthy, billionaires, and otherwise. So from a policy perspective, it is actually fascinating to see how the district is united around some things. But what I did show in my first term is that I will not legislate, nor will I seek to represent this district with an eye towards the next election. This is about doing the right thing. Why else are you in office than to do the right thing, even when the stakes can be really, really high? And that's certainly the way that I'll continue to campaign, and the way that I'll continue to legislate. Just to close out this point, though, I've played in the mud of politics. I've run negative ads before. I've had $20 million in negative ads thrown at me, to include many of which included my wife and my newborn child. And those ads sought to rip apart our community. Many of you saw those ads that were directed towards me. I am not, my campaign is not going to be part and parcel of anything divisive or toxic to be introduced into our community. I think we've had enough of that. This district has had enough of that. I'm done with it.
Very powerful. Thank you, Max. Any other questions for Max? We have a couple minutes, so we're good on time in case anyone was worried about that. Jonathan, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Max, thanks for joining us here tonight.
Hey, John, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. I wonder if you could spend a little bit of time talking about the experience you've had since you left office at the Defense Department and working on the COVID crisis.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. You know, I was on January 20th. I started my time at the Pentagon as the senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense for COVID, and oh my God, the Pentagon is just like a, you know, I'm still a major in the Army, and when a 2-star general comes around in the military, it's like God is walking around, and then you see all these generals walking around the Pentagon. I didn't know what to do, and then they called me sir, and I was nervous all day. But you know, my job was to run the COVID task force and to try to get a handle over the entire Department of Defense's COVID operations. You know, the Department of Defense runs a school system larger than Baltimore, a healthcare system larger than Kaiser. And amidst all of this, though, and COVID was rattled all of human society to include the Department of Defense. But what was the most exciting aspect of this is that we ran the America's Vaccination Program. And ultimately saw the unprecedented deployment over 10,000 service members to stand up mass vaccination sites across the country, from stadiums to arenas to all the like, and vaccinated tens of millions of people in the process. And what that reminded me of yet again is that when crisis hits, it is unbelievable what we can collectively accomplish as a country. And so after seeing that and after traveling across the country and visiting so many of these sites, I am ever more confident that there is nothing that we cannot accomplish, to include so many of the policies that I listed today.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Great, awesome. Any other questions for Max while we have him? What part of the neighborhood in Brooklyn are you most excited about hitting the ground running for?
Yeah, you know, and some of you might not know this, I was raised in Park Slope. That's why the Staten Island Republican Party has referred to me for the last 5 years as the dope from Park Slope. And you know, the other day I stood outside the subway at 9th Street and 7th Avenue, and you know, right, just Miley's Pizza and all these different places, people walking in Methodist, and you know, I'm having flashbacks to when I fell off, you know, the stoop, and I got rushed to the ER at Methodist, and you know, the late nights eating pizza over there and being idiots with my friends and going up to Prospect Park and playing in the 78th Precinct Youth Council, and just the idea that that this is part of the district is certainly. You can see how it kind of brings things full circle in a way.
What block were you on?
I lived on 8th Street between 7th and 8th Avenue.
1 block from my mother-in-law.
Yeah, I went to PS 39. In fact, I saw Joan Millman the other day, and yes, this was the first time that we had sat down at length. But what Joan didn't know, and I reminded her of, was that when the principal at PS 39 passed away in 1994 or 19-ish, I spoke at the funeral, at the memorial, and introduced the assembly member. And now, there we were. So it's life works in interesting, mysterious ways. You know, and you know, my wife as well spent the majority of her childhood. The vast majority of her childhood in Park Slope, was raised in Park Slope. So it's an interesting moment.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe we can lure you back over to the best borough one day, but we'll leave that for a separate conversation.
We're not leaving Staten Island. We're
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Max, for your time and reintroducing yourself to the club. We really appreciate it.
I thank you all so much. Thanks again.
Great. Okay, moving right along. As I mentioned, there will be some jumping back and forth between races. So we are going to move back to the 23rd State Senate District. And for those of you who need a refresh on the maps, I just dropped it in the chat as well. So feel free to take a peek at the maps. I think we were also joined by Pamela Patton Fines, who we endorsed last week for civil court judge. So welcome. And I do see some new faces here as well. So thank you all for joining. Okay, so we are moving, as I said, back to Senate District 23 with David Yaski up as our next candidate. David, I think I saw you, if you're able to.
Well, I don't know if you saw me, but I am here.
Yes, hello, welcome.
Hello.
Go ahead and
Thank you.
introduce yourself for about 3 minutes, and Danielle will give you the artfully crafted signs when time is running out. So
cool.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I see the art. All right. Well, thank you, Liz. I'll try and speak quickly to use the 3 minutes. And I first just want to thank you and thank IND. It's always for me a particular honor to come for IND. This club gave me my start in politics 20+ years ago. And, I am forever grateful and proud, because it's the kind of club that you want to give you your start. So I am running for this Senate seat for the simple reason that it is a terrific opportunity to deal with the problems that our city, our state, our neighborhoods face. And I have the experience, the know-how, and the grit to use that seat to the fullest. That's why I come before you. You don't need me to give the whole litany of problems. We're coming out of a pandemic that has consequences that we're just beginning to glimpse, not forget, understand. Consequences for kids in school, for mental health, for our economy. The central business district will not be the same. Manhattan, we don't know what it will be, but it's not going to be the same. We're again seeing that public safety can't be taken for granted. Safe streets, safe subways, safe parks that for a few decades New Yorkers have come take for granted. We can't, and at the same time, we're not going to go back to policies of mass incarceration and looking the other way at police violence. These are big challenges, and our neighborhoods have big challenges. As Jessica said, whenever I show somebody the map, they're like, "Wow, that's a weird district." I mean, I get it, but it's a great district. I mean, every part of it are neighborhoods like the ones that IND encompasses, and all the way, throughout the district. They're neighborhoods that people have a lot of pride in, that they are working hard to make good places to live, and they need a government that's going to work with them to keep them good place to live, make them better, and where they're not as good, to deal with that. Okay, so here we have the BQE, of course. I will work with Joanne as not just a partner, but as a leader. She's worked on this for decades. I have my own thoughts about what's the best way to fix it, but the key is community plan, community, supervision over the entire process. Coney Island and Red Hook they are like on the front lines of climate change. Coney Island already has flooding issues that it never had before. Red Hook will, within the time that this person, whoever wins this election, likely is going to be in office. Staten Island needs jobs desperately. And I was thrilled to hear Max Rose talk about offshore wind. I think that is a real opportunity. When I was in the City Council, passed the incentives for film and TV production that tripled the number of jobs. Offshore wind can be an even bigger source of jobs, and good paying jobs for people that aren't, lawyers and bankers. Nothing matter with lawyers and bankers. That is an adorable child, Jessica. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
you. I'm coming to you and ask for your endorsement because I have a depth of experience and a record that tells you that when I talk about dealing with these problems, it's not just talk. You know that I'm gonna, if I may not fix things on my own, but I'll be part of the group and part of the solution to fix them, because that's what I did throughout my entire time in government. They said we couldn't get affordable housing on the waterfront, couldn't force developers. We did it. Time is up. Time is up. So I thank you for the time, and I ask for your support.
Thank you for being so respectful of our wonderful timekeeper.
What choice do
She
I have?
deserves it. All right, moving over to Q&A. Steve, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Hey, David, how you doing? Steve Brownstein.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you.
David, you talked about in your mind a solution to BQE. Could you tell us what you envision as a potential solution? Also, I think the state senate, because of MTA, address what's going on with some of the subway stops, particularly like York Street, where there's a terrible entrance issue. I mean, could you tell us your potential solutions and what you would intend or try to do?
Sure.
Or your methodology?
Okay. Yes, and I will. And Steve, if it's too abbreviated, let's talk. I'll try and answer, but I also don't want to.
Gotcha.
So, I think that Joanne Simon has a terrific idea. Jessica referenced it, and to have an authority responsible for the BQE. Here's part of the problem. It's a governance, not nightmare. It's a governance problem because the city has jurisdiction over the Brooklyn Heights part, if you will, Atlantic Avenue to Fulton, and the state has jurisdiction north and south of that. Nightmare. And we saw this with Brooklyn Bridge Park. Joan Millman and Marty Connor did this incredible work, got the foundation started, and then it stalled because the city and the state couldn't agree. Finally, when the city was kind of put in charge and the state said, we'll step back, it was able to move forward. And again, that was, thanks to their leadership. So that is a governance thing. And then I have my pet ideas. I actually happen to be partial to some of the ideas for covering the trench in Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens that Joanne has talked about again, and not talked about, but like put blood, sweat, and tears into for decades. But I liked the plan that was put forward by the I'll call it neighborhood group for the cantilever part, but this needs a real process, and not process as a way to defer. But this is too big a deal, too important. You have to have the community have a lot of opportunity to voice its issues and have them heard, and you have to make a decision. So in my head, it's a year from start, ideas, community, and a decision, because we can't let it sit. That's the work. The worst thing is when you don't deal with a problem, it gets solved for you. That's my quick take on the BQE.
Great. Thank you. I'm sure we can spend an entire meeting talking just about the BQE plans, but I see Dan has his hand up. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Alyssa. So I put my question in the chat, and I feel a little silly asking, but being that, as someone pointed out, we have been burned in the past, I was wondering if Mr. Yaski and all the other state senate candidates be willing to pledge, if they haven't already, and sorry if I missed it, to always caucus with the Senate Democrats.
Oh, yes. Sorry, of course. Period.
And that's not a personal critique of anyone, frankly.
Yeah, understood. I understand why the question comes up, and of course, I have good relationships with many of the Democratic caucus members. I don't need to go on. Yes, period.
Yes, as well.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was just about to say, and for the record, Jessica agrees as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, but and also John, Jessica, we can talk further about this, but if for people who are personally affected by the IVF issue, the Department of Financial Services, I think, did push successfully the health insurers to cover same-sex couples. as you probably know, was the law that required all insurance companies, maybe 2018 or 19. And then they did take advantage of that loophole that Jessica pointed out. But last year, and in fact, I helped draft it, a Department of Financial Services circular to insurance companies that said, stop being cute. And, you know, I'm not, I haven't been involved in this for months, but my belief is that most, if not all, of the insurance companies heard that message and did indeed stop, you know, and they stopped being cute.
Great. So a question from the chat, Greg wants to know, if elected, would you support amending the New York State Charter School law to permit individual school to unionize? Current laws require the entire network to agree. Your take?
I think so. I haven't thought, you know, about that. So I don't know what that kind of, I've learned, I hope I've learned, you know, not too precipitous, because then you think something makes sense, then you hear things that you didn't appreciate. But in concept, that sounds like the right answer.
Great. I appreciate your candor there. Susanna, last question. Go ahead.
Great. Glad to get the last one. Okay. Thanks so much for being here. Just to thank you for also already talking about the BQE. That's on everybody's mind. And just kind of curious in terms of policy priorities, if you could sort of go through a couple of like big bucket issues and where you stand, like on, for example, the Single Payer Healthcare Act, and just if there's any other kind of major pieces of legislation that you would be supporting if they don't pass this year, like the Good Cause Eviction Act. And I guess like a kind of general, more just approach question is just, you know, on issues like big picture budget issues, like ensuring that home care workers get paid fairly. We have a home care employee crisis right now because we don't have enough. And the governor has proposed to give them bonuses, which is good, but doesn't really get to the long-term issue. Like, how would you approach handling a topic like that really needs much more budget attention to solve the problem at hand? I know that's a lot in there, but I just wanted to kind of throw a couple of those things out at you. Thank you.
Okay, no, it's a ton in there. And look, Susanna, feel free to interrupt me if I get off on one thing in too much depth and go back to the other stuff. But you know, I think the last one about the budgeting and you know, home care workers, which is you know, that's like the perfect kind of vexing problem, and it's related to universal daycare, you know, that Jessica talked about, which it has to be. That's the next thing that some government has to do, right? That's the kind of big unfinished part in some ways of 1960s, 70s revolutions is childcare. Hugely expensive. Which is not say don't do it. You know, we costed it about $8 billion a year, which is a big amount of money. I don't know if that was somebody you know, exclaiming in horror or just background noise, I think. But so, and by the way, one of the questions you first get is, or you first have to face is, you know, daycare workers are paid something, I don't know, I'm not going to remember the number, but a huge number of daycare workers get public assistance of one kind or another because they're not paid enough not to. So, well, we want to raise those salaries. You also want to have more daycare slots, and you know, in a world of finite resource, you got to figure out which one to do. And you know, I like the answer both, but I also understand that often you're going to have to choose. I've been doing, you know, kind of dealing with issues like that my whole career. I started at the city budget office. Then when I was in the council, you know, and I think I'm proud of the budgets that we put through year in, year out. I actually, in some ways, better budgets than we had the last few years because we got more bang for the buck. You know, under Bill de Blasio, the city budget skyrocketed. I'm not convinced the amount of service I got was commensurate with that increase. But
David,
then, I ran. Okay, I ran a city agency. I ran a law school. I had to do budgets for those institutions that were very tough calls all the time.
Thank you. Sorry to speed up the end of the answer there. Just want to be respectful of all the candidates' time tonight, and thank you so much for joining us and reintroducing yourself to IND. And for everyone who's following, David will appear on the ballot for Senate District 23 when we pass out ballots later tonight. So thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
Of course. So switching gears yet again, back to the congressional level, where we're joined by not only congressmen, but my own congressman, as well as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, who is seeking our endorsement for re-election for Congressional District 10. Congressman, feel free to unmute yourself and reintroduce yourself to the club.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I want to thank IND for all you do to make sure we have a strong and active Democratic Party. I'm honored that my new district will include large parts of the 52nd Assembly District and IND and the neighborhoods of Borum Hill, Carroll Gardens, and Cobble Hill. And I'm committed to working with you and the entire community to represent you in Washington. I would not be able to do what I do in Congress without support from progressive Democratic clubs like IND, and I look forward to your support. We've had an incredibly busy couple of years, and I'm proud of my strong progressive record in Congress. From impeaching Donald Trump twice, to passing the Droga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, to rolling back civil rights abuses in the Patriot Act, to fighting for artists to be paid in the Music Modernization Act, to fighting to increase funding for infrastructure and mass transit, to supporting the Green New Deal and fighting climate change, which we all know is an existential threat to the human race. This past year, I've been working diligently to address issues that matter most to New Yorkers. While it's been a tough year, I'm proud to have passed legislation that has helped working families and addressed social inequities brought on by COVID. We passed legislation that boosted funding for rental assistance and ensured that those affected by the pandemic could make ends meet. We also passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill that will revitalize our nation's critical infrastructure, bringing $20 billion to New York to fund crucial projects ranging from the Gateway Tunnel project to the Cross Harbor Rail Freight Tunnel and 2nd Avenue subway expansion to the newly announced Interborough Express. I also strongly supported the Build Back Better Act, which is the single largest investment in working families in American history. As passed the House, this bill stops insulin price gouging, capping costs at $35. It also expands paid family and medical leave, funds universal pre-K, and extends the child subsidy so many families rely on. Plus, it would enact major parts of the Green New Deal to tackle climate change and make the key investments we need in clean, renewable energy. My work in Congress on the expansion of civil rights and recognition for the LGBTQ community has been by far some of the most meaningful and important work I've done in Congress. I'm incredibly proud of how far we've come. Each of these bills represents important changes to the law to bend the arc of justice to make us a fairer, more equal, and ultimately better country. As chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, I've also been proud to use every tool at my disposal to defend a woman's right to access safe reproductive care. For decades, I have fought to make sure women maintain their constitutionally guaranteed right to have an abortion. Our committee has jurisdiction over many of the most pressing and vital issues facing our country today, from civil rights to immigration to gun control. Just to note a few of the major pieces of legislation that I have brought to the floor and been instrumental in passing the House: the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which would strengthen the Voting Rights Act and restore key protections for minority voters that were gutted by the Supreme Court. The American Dream and Promise Act, which would provide legal protections and a path to citizenship for dreamers who were brought to this country as children and know only the U.S. as their home. The Equality Act, which would provide comprehensive civil rights protections to LGBTQ Americans. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which would reform policing in a variety of ways. Legislation to require universal gun background checks. The No Ban Act to ensure that no president could enact another Muslim ban, such as President Trump imposed. Other legislation that we passed in the Judiciary Committee that I hope will reach the House floor at some point soon includes my Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act, which would decriminalize marijuana at the federal level, expunge prior convictions, and provide services to those who are most affected by the war on drugs. A range of bills to address the antitrust concerns presented by the big tech companies. The Shop Safe Act, which would crack down on counterfeit products sold online, and several bills to address anti-competitive behavior by drug companies that enable them to charge consumers artificially high prices for prescription drugs. On a more local level, I'm proud to say that I've worked on many issues that are important to Brownstone, Brooklyn. I've been very much a supporter of congestion pricing. We must do all we can to fight congestion and support the MTA. And I'm also fighting against the scourge of helicopters. That's a major nuisance for all of us. I have introduced legislation that would ban them in New York City, and I hope we'll see movement on this legislation in Congress. I want to say thank you for the club's longstanding friendship and your ongoing activism. I've always enjoyed attending IND's dinners and events, and I humbly ask for your support and endorsement, and obviously I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Congressman. I know IND throws a wonderful dinner party. Hopefully we'll be back at it now that seems like we're towards the end of the pandemic. So more to come on that. I defer to the dinner committee. Speaking of the dinner committee, hello, Hal. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, Jerry. I don't know if you remember me. I knew you when I was in the Village Independent Democrats, and welcome to the 52nd. You've said quite a bit about the work you've done. It's extremely impressive, but going forward, where are you going to be putting your attention on what you think are unfinished issues that need attention, both on the local and on the national level?
Well, on the local level, I've mentioned the helicopters, which we haven't accomplished, and the congestion pricing, which we haven't accomplished, which I hope we have accomplished, I should say, I'm sorry. We still have to pass the Equality Act in the Senate. We still have to pass the Build Back Better Act. We still have to pass a lot of this legislation, the Dreamers, all of this, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of this legislation is stuck in the Senate because of the filibuster. We have to continue. I played a role. I heard my opponent, Ashmi, say a couple of things, which shows either that she's lying or more charitable, she just doesn't understand. But she said that I supported surveillance. The fact is I didn't, and we have more work to do. In 2015, when we were in the minority, I helped pass the USA Freedom Act, which reformed FISA. It was the most significant reform of FISA. Not every change we'd like to see, but decisive steps in the right direction. Most significant of the reforms included ending the NSA's Call Detail Records program, prohibiting use of Section 215 to acquire information that would otherwise require a warrant in the law enforcement context without a warrant, and disclosure of all significant opinions of the FISA court within 180 days. Now, we were in the minority, so we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got a lot. And we did the best we could, given the fact that we're in the minority. She also said that I voted against ENDA, that I was against gay rights, which is absurd. I've been one of the leaders on gay rights, on LGBTQ rights, I should say, for as long as I've been in public office, since 1977. Now, and I was in fact the author of the congressional brief, the congressional amicus brief in the Windsor marriage case. I'd introduced legislation against DOMA back in, against the Defense of Marriage Act back in the 90s. What she's referring to is that back in 2007, I voted against ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, because the final negotiated bill didn't include protections on the basis of gender identity or expression. I pushed very hard for these trans-inclusive protections, but when the final package emerged without it, I felt I had to vote no, because if we'd passed that legislation at that point without the transgender protections, history tells us you'd never get transgender protections. I've been a lead sponsored proposal like ENDA every time they were introduced since I became a member of the Assembly back in '77. I have sponsored similar legislation every single session in Congress. And I'm a proud original co-sponsor of the original bill that protects the entire LGBTQ community. So I just thought I had to use this opportunity to set the record straight.
We appreciate that. Thank you, Congressman. Another member asked if there, and I see your hand up, Joe, I'll get to you in just one sec, but one member asked if there is anything to that we can look at federally for vehicle safety for pedestrians, since traffic fatalities are on the rise and cars are getting bigger and scarier. Can you speak to anything that could be done at the federal level?
I haven't thought about that, so I'm not going to answer it off the top of my head. The one thing we do want to do, obviously, is and this may lead to lighter vehicles, which will be safer, therefore, safer for pedestrians, is to get rid of internal combustion cars and switch to electric cars for obvious reasons for climate change. But I think that may have a beneficial side effect since electric cars tend to be lighter and therefore less damaging.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I appreciate that you don't know yet, maybe something to think about for next time. Joe, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. Yeah, on a more existentialist level, we read a lot, and I know a lot of people feel that that the Democrats are in for a really, really rough time in 2022, and that they're going to, at a best case scenario is, they'll only lose the House. Yet a lot of people also feel that the Democratic leadership is acting like it's still 2016 and not really doing anything to address this change in the public, or the fact that we're dealing with, in my opinion, a bunch of crazy, hypocritical, lunatic son of a bees. And I know a lot of the problems, it's funny you said, we were in the minority and we couldn't get things passed. Well, now we're in the majority and we're still not getting things passed. I know that's not because of the House, but what do you feel that's an accurate description? And what are your solutions to that? Because I know
my solution
especially people with young children, they're worried about the future.
Well, they ought to be worried. We're in a very tough situation. I worry for American democracy. The January 6th was a coup attempt and came very close to succeeding, and would have succeeded, but for, I hate to say it, but for Vice President Pence, who stood up to a lot of pressure under the advice of all people, former Vice President Quayle. And you see the Republicans trying to, primary honest Republicans like Brad Raffensperger and others who counted votes fairly, and trying to take over for all the vote counting machinery at the precinct level in most of the swing states. And if they succeed in doing that, as Joseph Stalin said, I don't care who votes, I care who counts the votes. And that's a very existential threat to American democracy. Now, I think, coming back to the essence of your question, we have never passed major legislation in this country without a substantial majority. LBJ had 295 Democrats in the House. We have 222. We have a majority of 5. And yet the party is held very even. I have to compliment our leadership, Nancy and Steny and others, who have held our party together. And we've managed to get a majority with 5 votes to spare on every major issue we've had. Now, the Senate, I think Chuck has done an amazing job, but he has no votes to spare. And we've never passed major legislation in this country with no votes to spare. There's always someone who disagrees, and we see now there are 2, Manchin and Sinema. And even when they agree, you've got the filibuster. They're not willing to break the filibuster. I think the filibuster is an undemocratic institution, should be abolished altogether, but that's a whole different question. Now, as far as the election is concerned, I'm not so pessimistic. I think it's very much up in the air. There were several reasons why people were very pessimistic and are very pessimistic about our ability to hold the Congress, to hold the House. One is that traditionally the president's party loses a significant number of seats in the first midterm election. However, that's because usually when a president gets elected, he brings in with him a lot of House candidates and Senate candidates. But for this purpose, the House, the Senate isn't up for re-election for 6 years. He brings in with him a lot of House candidates on his coattails who wouldn't otherwise have gotten elected. And they're weak candidates. And 2 years later, when he's not on the ballot, they lose. This didn't happen 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we lost House seats when the president was winning. So those weaker candidates aren't there at this point. So that reason doesn't apply. Secondly, we were very concerned about the fact that Republicans controlled, I think, 2/3 of the states in terms of reapportionment, and we were worried that they just gerrymander the House majority. And with most states having voted, having fixed their lines now, that hasn't happened. Why it hasn't happened is a much lengthier story, I think, but it hasn't happened. In fact, we're probably a little ahead of where we were in terms of redistricting. And the third reason is that the president's popularity is down and very low. And the president's popularity can drag us down, and normally would. However, and I don't celebrate this at all, but because of what's happening in Eastern Europe now, what's happening with Ukraine, it's totally unpredictable how the president's going to come out of that. It may be that his handling of the situation, which I think has been excellent so far and right on the money, and it may be that the people will conclude the same thing, that his rating will go up or not. We don't know, but that's possible. So my conclusion is that we just don't know about the election, and because there are reasons all the normal rules seem to be in abeyance.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Congressman.
Thank the congressman for when I turned on my TV back in January. What was it, 20? Whatever. You were I saw you at the airport with Nydia Velasquez.
Yes.
Yeah, I really want to thank you for that.
That was very interesting because Nydia called me and suggested we go to the airport, and I said I was in the cab already. I'll meet you there.
Well, we know we have very values-aligned elected officials, and while the state of the rest of the nation is, up in the air, we know democracy is strong here in the 52nd, and we will be turning out to vote. So thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Nadler. The congressman will appear on your ballot, which will be distributed when we go into a breakout room later. But thank you again, Congressman, for joining us. Okay, as I said, switching gears from federal to state Senate, back again, and now back again. We are joined by State Senator Andrew Gunardis from Senate District 22. Senator Gunardis, feel free to unmute yourself and take a few minutes to reintroduce yourself to the club as an official candidate that we have the opportunity to endorse.
Great. Well, thank you, Alyssa. Hello, everyone. I've never felt the stakes for an IND meeting to be so high now that the district I'll be running in actually covers the neighborhoods that you all represent. So, we've obviously had a very long relationship stemming back to 2018, actually before 2018, 2012, in my first race for the Senate. But certainly you guys were instrumental in 2018 and 2020. And so now with redistricting, I know we've heard a lot about redistricting so far tonight. The boundaries of the 22nd district, where I will continue to live, go all the way from Sheepshead Bay all the way up to downtown Brooklyn, all the way up to Tillery Street, and include a hearty chunk of the 52nd Assembly District, basically everything west of 4th Avenue. So it is great to be here with you all as a candidate for the state Senate. I would love to once again have this club's support as I seek my third term in the legislature. I think it has been an incredibly powerful 4 years, 2 terms so far. The number of victories, progressive victories that we have notched together have been tremendous. And we've done that even when we've been facing, at least locally, some incredibly strong headwinds on the ground. I don't have to tell anyone in this room how tough it's been to win and survive re-election in Southern Brooklyn with red wave after red wave in a district that Trump has won, multiple times. Despite those headwinds, I think we've notched some really significant wins, whether it relates to public education funding, sexual harassment law, mass transit, and a whole host of things. I am incredibly proud of that work, and I'm looking forward now and excited about what's to come. Some of the things that I'm really looking forward to working on this year, some of you may have seen just last week, I introduced a Freelancers Bill of Rights called the Freelance Isn't Free Act to cover statewide protections for freelance workers. This builds on the success of the city law that was passed in 2017 by our now comptroller, Brad Lander. Working with my colleague here, Joanne Simon, we are taking a big bite out of sexual harassment law and really strengthening the laws above and beyond where they've ever been across the country in terms of holding sexual harassers accountable, those who discriminate in the workplace accountable, and really helping to protect survivors and empower survivors and protect their voices. I'm going to continue to be someone who stands up for the rights of people in organized labor. I previously chaired the Civil Service Committee. I'm a member of the Labor Committee. Now I chair the Budget and Revenue Committee. But no matter what side of the table you're on, public or private sector, I've always prided myself, my ability to stand up for workers and to be part of a robust labor movement. And also, the other thing I really want to focus on and something that I'm really committed to that I'm hoping we can win this year is what we are calling the New Deal for CUNY. I currently represent more CUNY students than any other legislator in the state. CUNY has seen its funding decline from the state funding decline by 20% over the last decade. This is at the same time that it is trying to educate more than 300,000 undergraduate, graduates, and non-degree seeking students. And it is so important that we actually utilize CUNY as the leverage point to help us get back our economic recovery back on track. When we talk about workforce development, CUNY needs to be in that sentence. When we talk about supporting students with special needs, CUNY needs to be part of that sentence. When we talk about economic recovery, CUNY needs to be part of that conversation. CUNY is the linchpin of what New York City is capable of doing if only we were willing to invest in it at the level that it needs to be. And I have made fighting for CUNY a huge priority of my time in the legislature. And this year we are really pushing to get the New Deal for CUNY enacted in the state budget. I see Danielle gave me the time's up, so I'm going to stop there. I would love to answer your questions, and I would love to have this club's support once again for my reelection. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Senator. And thank you again to Danielle, our wonderful timekeeper, for her artful signs, keeping us all on track. Any questions for the Senator of the 22nd Senate District? Feel free to raise your hand or drop a question in the chat. I will start us off. To our knowledge, I don't believe you are running against anyone in a primary. Is that correct?
Not to my knowledge. These new lines have scrambled everything, so I have no idea. But so far as I can tell, there has been no declared primary challenger.
Great.
Nobody get yes, please.
Let's keep it that way. There's already enough craziness going on with the districts. Great. Any other more official questions than my softball? Let's see. So let's talk about committee work. Would you plan to stay on the same committees, or would you look to shift? What's your thought on that?
So just this year, the majority leader gave me the chairmanship of the Budget and Revenue Committee. That was the committee that was previously chaired by Senator Benjamin, now Lieutenant Governor Benjamin. It is basically has everything to do with tax policy in the state. It works hand in hand with the Finance Committee in taking tax policy and then shaping it into the final state budget. I'm really going to enjoy sinking my teeth into that new committee assignment. I also serve on the Civil Service and Pensions Committee still, the Labor Committee, Higher Education, the Insurance Committee, Judiciary Committee, and I'm missing one. I think I'm missing, and Finance as well, sorry. So I have a full committee roster. I love the committee assignments I have. I want to keep working those committee assignments. It gives me the opportunity to really dive into a lot of things that I think really affect people's everyday lives, which is what my focus has always been.
That's great. Danielle, question, go ahead.
Hey, Senator. I'm wondering if, the kind of redrawn district offers you the opportunity to do things a little bit differently. And if so, do you think you'd approach the role, differently than you have thus far, particularly in the face of, you've had a bunch of kind of close races and there's always kind of the threat of a Republican coming at you. Do you think that you might be able to reorient in some ways?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes and no. I actually do have a declared Republican challenger so far, so I haven't avoided that, escaped that fate yet. I think I have a pretty strong progressive voting record. I think my record of issues speaks for itself. I have not shied away from taking on progressive fights. What I think is going to change a little bit is how I talk about some of the issues that I've engaged in and that I've supported in the past to meet the expectations of these new constituencies. I've been able to go into rooms where 9 out of 10 people were stacked against me and talk about progressive issues in a way that I think was approachable and accessible to them. I'm not going to have those same conversations in the same way, using the same rhetoric or vocabulary that I've had to in the past. That's going to be a shift for me in terms of how I approach this work. And I think it'll also afford me the opportunity to be able to step up and be more active on issues that I've supported, but because of local concerns have not been able to take a leadership role in some of those fights. And so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be able to do more of that moving forward.
Great. Yeah, we're excited that you have more of the 52nd Assembly District. And we, if you get our endorsement, we'll be able to carry your petitions, not just loan our members out to your campaign in Southern Brooklyn. Any other questions? David Yaski says, what a great answer, which is good. Another question just came into the chat. One in particular, Senator, who is going anonymously tonight, said, I have a question. When will Andrew thank me for the time I've invested in teaching him how to be the best senator he can be? Which comes from, as you can probably imagine, Senator Myrie.
Well, I think actually, if I missed it already, tomorrow is Senator Myrie's birthday.
Oh.
So I think it would be incredibly appropriate for this club to wish Zellner Myrie a very happy and hearty birthday, because he is someone who, deserves to be celebrated in every way possible. So Zellner, great to spend this time with you. Happy birthday, man. You're great. And I just wish you nothing but health and happiness.
Who wants to sing?
I would say we should sing, but I want to keep on schedule, and I know how particular we can be, but lots of birthday shout outs and good wishes to our friend and Senator Myrie. Any last questions for Senator Gounardis while we have him? Hearing none, I will give you back 3 extra minutes in your evening, which I'm sure you will appreciate. Thank you so much, Senator, for joining us.
Thank you very much. I hope I can earn your support. Looking forward to working with you all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And while we have a couple extra minutes before the next candidate, just want to give a huge shout out to Assemblymember Simon, who joined us. Hello, Joanne. And Judge Swern, I think I saw you on there as well. And
good evening, everyone.
Good to see you. And just a friendly reminder for folks who joined later, if you can please rename yourself to your full name so you could be accounted for attendance purposes as well as ballot purposes. I see an iPhone 7. If you can identify yourself, that would be helpful. And feel free to, if you can't change it on the screen, just chat your name to us so we can record your attendance. And while I have a whole extra minute and a half, I will remind folks that petitioning will begin pretty soon after we make this last round of endorsements. So keep your eyes peeled for emails from us about petition pickups and petitioning kickoffs and all the like. I think the week of February 28th, which is just 5 days away, we'll be pretty busy if we can stay on schedule and if county can stay on schedule and all of those things. So for folks who are able to go out to green markets and in the neighborhood to collect signatures, we hope you will have your sneakers ready and able to hit the ground running for us. And then for folks that want to stay indoors and pass out petitions, we have roles for you as well. So please be on the lookout. The work of democracy does not stop when we make our endorsements. It has only just begun. And I think I've appropriately filled my time. So let's see. Next up, we have a candidate for Congressional District 11, Komi Agoda Kasima. Please correct me if I did not pronounce that correctly, but I have seen you here almost the entire meeting. So thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the club. Oh, I think you're speaking, but you're on mute.
My name is Komi Agoda Kusema, and I'm running for Congressional District 11 as first-time candidate. I have been a teacher, educator all my life. I immigrated to the United States in 1985, went back to teach high school in Gabon. between 86 and 88 and came back and continued to teach at the New York City Department of Education since 89 to present. I've been a teacher all my life. Also adjunct at Touro College, where I teach graduate students in the School of Education to also become teachers. So teaching is dear to my heart. I would say this, the three things or 3 points I want to emphasize in wanting to run for office. First is on education. Second, small business support. And the third one is infrastructure. Now, education includes looking and trying to get resources for K-12 schools. As a high school teacher all my life, I would say this again, education is a foundation for everything we do in our modern day society. The United States of America has been good to me. I came here with a master's degree. I had a second and a third master's and a PhD. I cannot be more grateful for such an experience. And so, given that background as an immigrant, I believe I can contribute to society, especially my constituency, by giving them what I think would make the society or my constituency better. Public office or politics, by definition, is a matter of serving the needs of the people. You are not going to office to become a leader. You are going to become a servant. We are supposed to be serving our constituencies. And I heard a couple of points here and there about the midterm elections being a jumper on the Democratic side. In other words, we might lose the House and all that stuff. We need new faces in politics in order to make the difference. And I think status quo representation has failed the immigrants in the constituency who make our city and constituency run. That's why I wanted to put my 2 cents in this race. I believe we can make a big difference. We can make a better difference. I do not have even the money it takes to run for public office. But public office is not about money and money alone. It's about the people you represent who are going to make that decision for themselves. So I think we are running an unorthodox campaign with grassroots support all over the place, from our faith-based communities and our immigrant populations across this city, not to mention Congressional District 11. So with that said, I think we have what it takes to run a viable winning campaign. So I am here for you. You can ask me any questions. I will try and answer them the best I can, because I have never been a politician in my life. I don't know what it means to be a politician, but I think politics is not about knowing how to spell what bills you are proposing to be voted upon. It's about representing the needs of the people you represent. It's about common sense solutions that you need to fight for. And I think anybody who has some common sense and the heart in the right place with the passion to represent the people can do a good job as a politician.
Great. Thank you so much, Comey. Appreciate you introducing yourself. So opening it up for questions now. Again, feel free to use the raise hand feature or drop your question in the chat. Any questions for Comey? Lynn, yes, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm going to ask a similar question again. You've told us that you think that you would be a good candidate because you are a new face and because your heart is in the right place and you have good ideas that you would like to put into effect. But we have an incumbent in the position right now who's got years of experience. So what is it about the current congressman in your district that you feel is lacking, or that where would you think you could do a better job?
Lynn,
You
just a factual correction. I believe Comey is running in the Malliotakis seat, the same one as
Oh.
Max Rose. So the incumbent is a Republican, just for transparency. But go ahead, Comey. I think the question is still a good one. Why do you think you would be good in Congress?
Well, I would say that as far as the current incumbent is concerned, having voted to nullify our democracy or not even certify the vote, the vote for the presidency was just unimaginable. I don't know anybody in their right mind who represents the interest of their constituency who would think in that direction. That's the first, not only a misstep, a huge blunder that needs to be addressed. So also, as a teacher in the system for 33 years, I've never seen my representative. So I don't know, as an educator, not be able to come in contact with my representative means anything. How about the average person who may not be able to even know what it means to even spell the word representative? How do you represent people and they don't know you? We need to be accessible to our representatives. Somebody mentioned the issue of listening to the people and even knowing what they want. That's what you represent. You're not representing the bills you want to pass. It doesn't matter how many bills you want to pass. It matters what your people need and want. That's what you fight for. And I don't know if I've ever seen her anywhere. Forget about her representing the constituency. So with that, I think we can make things, if not different, better.
Agreed. I think getting her out of this seat is a shared goal of all of IND, since we are a Democratic club. Any other questions for Comey? See those hands get raised. I appreciate your background as an educator, and thank you for being an educator for as long as you have. We've all had teachers in our lives that have made a difference to us, so thank you on behalf of all students everywhere. Joanne, I see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your great work, Comey. As a former educator, I'm very impressed that you're running, and I know how hard you work. I'm curious though, what part of the district do you live in? Are you from Staten Island? Are you from Brooklyn? This district is now very different than it was. And so maybe you can help us understand how you come to this.
I live on Staten Island.
Okay. And where do you teach?
I teach at Curtis High School currently on Staten Island. I've taught schools from Brooklyn, the junior high school, the Bronx, back in Brooklyn in Sarah Hill High School, and currently Curtis High School. So I've taught across the city.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And what committees would you hope to serve on in Congress? I'm assuming education, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolute education comes first and foremost. And after education, I would want to serve on the immigration committee and any other committee that might call for my services. But the first two are education and immigration. Why immigration? I think this is the best country on the planet. I immigrated from a small country in Togo. Togo is in West Africa. Most people, when they say, oh, you speak with an accent, where are you from? I say, Togo. They say, what's that? We need to educate our students in simple geography lessons. We need, even most students in high school even don't even know the geography of the United States, which is a little bit appalling, but that's besides the point. So we can do better. Education is my passion, and we can make America the great country it is even greater.
Great. Lynn, I see your hand up. Is it up again or is it left over? Okay. Great. Any other questions for Comey?
I'll ask a question if nobody has one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Comey. So as an educator, like better than anyone that a lot of times education can be difficult because there are other systemic issues affecting students, whether it's access to food or, things that might be going on at home. Can you talk a little bit about, some of your priorities around those issue areas?
Absolutely. When it comes to education, foundation is key. So we're talking about pre-K school bill that has to be passed. We need to nurture our kids, give them a solid foundation, teach them the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic. The computers will take care of themselves. We have to go back to the old school reading, writing, and arithmetic. I cannot emphasize that enough. We cannot assume that because a child goes to school from K to 12 and has a high school diploma, it means they study or they learn or they have mastered the skills necessary. We have to find a better way of doing that. I'm not going to bore you with all the details of what we do in the classroom per se, but we can do better. There are things that can be improved. We cannot focus too much on computer literacy. We have to focus. Kids today in high school cannot even hold a pen to write. It's not their fault. It's because we're allowing it to happen. We have to go back. When we nurture the basics, everything else will fall in place.
Great.
So I
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I think once we are able to work with education, and as a matter of fact, to go a little further, the idea of a regent's diploma, we have to begin to reimagine the structure of our educational structure. What do I mean by that? We have to follow our kids from the junior high school and develop all their talents. We need plumbers, we need electricians, we need technicians, we need car mechanics. Everybody doesn't have to go to college to succeed. Some of these jobs pay better than college degree holders. So we have to go back again to the basics of making everybody self-sufficient by what they can do. And we can do that. There is no way America, with all our might, all our resources, all our wealth, the richest country on the planet, we have to sit down here and wonder why some of our kids are not productive. There's no room for that.
Yeah.
We can.
That's all very good points. And Lauren says, as a former teacher, he agrees as well. So I think you made some good points tonight, and appreciate you sharing your story and answering our questions here. If there are no other questions for Comey, seeing none, thank you so much for joining. And Comey will appear on the ballot for Congressional District 11 when the ballots are circulated a little bit later on this evening. But thank you again, Comey, for joining us.
Races and 2 Senate races, and we do intense questions.
I'm sorry. Thanks again, Comey. Sorry, somebody must have come off mute.
Thank you for sharing.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Switching gears, but staying at the federal level, we are heading over to Congressional District 10, which is currently held by Congressman Nadler, to hear from Brian Robinson, who I believe I saw on the line. Brian, yes, there you are. Hi, welcome. Feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and introduce yourself to the club for about 3 minutes. Danielle will give you a time signal when you're running low on time, but yep, those are them. Go ahead and take it away.
Appreciate that. Well, first of all, I'm going to use at least 5 seconds to thank Comey for that, because that was inspiring. I would support that guy. Absolutely. So hi, everybody. I'm Brian Robinson. I'm a father of a beautiful 4-year-old girl. I'm a concerned father. I'm a Jewish American, small business owner, and community volunteer.
Okay.
I'm not an establishment politician. Ran a consumer advocacy company, which I founded for the past 12 years. I was a philosophy major. I'm an advocate of open debate, and rhetoric is very important to me. I'm running because this country is fractured. Leadership in Congress has never been so polarized, and the toxicity in DC trickles down to the people. We assume the worst of each other. The kids have no voice. The adults set a poor example. We need to tap into a more rational America. Radical politics from either side do not serve or even represent the people of this country. People are complex, we know that. And most people are not served by political labels or categories. We are more than that, and we absolutely need to be more than that. That's why I'm running. The status quo is not cutting it. The incumbent, who I respect, has not changed, while the city and the country has. He's on record stating substantial cuts to New York City's police budget should be made. He has publicly endorsed Alvin Bragg as district attorney, the very same man who decriminalized armed robbery, which has led to our catch and release problem. Murder is up 52% since 2019, and that's easy enough to blame on the pandemic. However, this is not happening in big cities across other developed nations. My own wife and daughter were followed from the street into our building, up to my door. I had to escort the man out personally. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, myriads of small businesses went under, many of whom are my friends. The government asked to close whilst it couldn't provide the means to survive. That's the beauty of politics. That's the beauty of democracy. When the status quo isn't serving the people have the power. For public safety, I would propose a grant to help and properly categorize violent crime and crime of racial or gender bias. For small businesses, I would reduce taxes for small businesses, 50 people and under. As we look toward a better future, we ought to use the past as our guide, but ultimately, we must leave it behind. I hope you'll give a fresh face a chance, and I respectfully ask for your endorsement.
Great, thank you. And thanks for respecting our timekeeper, as always. Opening it up for questions now. If you have a question for Brian, feel free to raise your hand. Just a factual question. What part of the district do you live in?
I live downtown, so financial district / Tribeca.
Cool. Not
And
the cooler
Chinatown
downtown,
is right above
which
me.
is right
I'm sorry?
downtown Brook, and not the cooler part of the district, which is obviously the Brooklyn side. But we'll
I
let it
wish
slide.
I was as cool as you guys. I do.
There is time. You can still join
It
the
might,
borough.
it might have to happen.
Great. Opening up for questions. John, did I see your hand, or did you just pop to that side of my screen? No? Okay. Do you have a question? No? All right. Cool. So I know we do shorter introduction times to save room for questions, but we'd love for you to speak a little bit about if you were elected, what committees you would like to serve on, and what kind of legislative work you would like to focus on.
I would work on the small business committee. I think that's a bipartisan issue. I do expect that the Republicans will take the House after midterms, and it's because the Democrats need new leadership. I know we don't like to hear it, but I'm a moderate and I'm in a perfect position to make things happen in a rather large middle ground, which we need to rediscover. So small businesses on both sides, I think, are a simple place to start. I'd also like to be on the Space and Technology Exploration Committee because there's a lot of ethical issues and messaging problems that come out of the committee, with genomics and DNA engineering. There are certain things that I think need to be kept an eye on, and as somebody who has a particular interest in bioethics, that would be very stimulating to me, and I think I would do a good job on it.
Great. And of course, the chairwoman of the Small Business Committee is our own Nydia Velasquez of District 7. So we do a lot of small business related issues and work here. And she's been doing a great job as chairperson, and before that as ranker. So you would work closely with her, which is great. Any other
I'm a big fan
questions
of her.
for? Yeah, she's wonderful. She's the one congressperson that we kept in the redistricting shuffle. So some consistency there.
I know Chinatown is feeling the loss.
Yeah. Right. Any other questions for Brian? I can keep going, but I've been talking a lot tonight, and there are others on this call. Jason, do you have a question?
Since you're calling on me, I was actually thinking now's a perfect time for the question Lynn has been asking all night, which is that there is an incumbent, and there's a lot of people. I'll speak for myself. I think he's done a fairly good job in some ways. What's your argument specifically regarding displacing an incumbent?
I respect his record over a long period of time. There's two issues at play. One, multi-decade incumbencies, and how motivated are you staying to really work for the people in decade 3? I am a proponent of term limits, and I think part of the issue that the Democrats are seeing is that we're seeing Democrats who have been around so long, they've lost touch with the pulse of the streets. And for that reason, Jerry Nadler, although I respect him, I think his rhetoric as of the last couple of years has been irresponsible. It's led to the adoption of irresponsible policies on the local levels, and it's gotten people killed.
Okay, any other questions for Brian while we have him? Yes, Dan.
I know you want to be on the space committee.
Mm-hmm.
What's your position on
I think he's asking what's your position on space? Or he might have gotten the giggles.
I believe in space. I'm pro space. It exists.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Time space continuum, the whole deal.
He's asking about the Space Force.
Oh, the multiverse? Oh no, the Space Force.
The Space Force, I don't have a lot of interest in that. More bioengineering is my interest.
Got it.
But
Howard,
thanks
do you
for that
have
question.
an earthbound question?
Yeah, since this is the most Jewish district in America, I want to know latkes or hamantaschen and gefilte fish, sweet or savory?
I like savory.
Oh, you may get my vote yet.
Right. I've been in Borough Park a fair amount, which is a large part of the district, and I'm getting a lot of support there. Getting a lot of support in downtown Manhattan and Upper West Side, a bastion of liberalism. I'm getting a lot of support there because they're scared out of their minds. Public safety is a huge issue there. Anti-Semitic crime is up 275% just in the last month. Miriam's beloved restaurant was just desecrated with anti-Jewish sentiment. Again, I'm a Jewish guy, and that doesn't sit right with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for bearing with us as we took you through space and then through Jewish delicatessens. Run the gamut here at IND.
I'm very adaptable.
That's perfect. And next time you come to our part of the district, you'll have to stop by Shelsky's for some good lox. When I ate lox, that was where I went. But my husband made me
what is
a
the name of
vegan
it?
now. Shelsky's. It's on on Court Street. Yeah, it's pretty.
I'd love to come by.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Of course. All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Again, Brian will be running for Congressional District 10 and will be on the ballot when we send them out later this evening. Moving right along, a few candidates left. Next up, we'll be hearing from Bianca Raj Prasad. Please correct me if I said that wrong. Bianca, thank you so much for joining us. I see you're here. Feel free to unmute yourself. We'll do about 3 minutes for introduction, and Danielle will be our timekeeper. So keep your eyes peeled for her signs, and then we'll do some Q&A. So take it away.
Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. As your president mentioned, I am running for the 23rd Senate District seat. Just a little background on myself. I grew up in the Senate District, proud product of the public school system in the district. attended PS 22, IS 51, and Curtis High School. Went on to receive my bachelor's from the University at Albany and received my master's in public administration from Kent State University. After I finished my higher education, I went on to work for the state legislature, started my career with Assemblymember Daniel Donald, who represents the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and then went on to work for Assemblymember Cusick, where I served as the director of Constituent Affairs and Communications. So I was really hands-on in that seat, working with local civic associations, community board leaders to address the issues on the ground. I went on to work for one of the top 10 consulting firms in the state of New York, Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron, where I currently work at now, where I oversee advocacy for nonprofits in the state. So I'm running for state senate to be an effective voice for my community and bring back common sense governance. That's my goal. As someone who grew up in the district, I know firsthand the disparities that our community faces every day. When we speak on education disparities, as someone who went to a public school in the district, I remember going to school and being handed a textbook with ripped out pages, while some friends of mine in schools outside of the district were given tablets and Chromebooks, right? But I was taught that to be successful, you have to have an education behind you. And luckily I had a village behind me who helped me to get to where I am. While politicians run on the stance of addressing mental health and fixing the disparities within our youth community, as someone with a mother who suffered from schizophrenia and thoughts disorder, I know firsthand how mental health and mental illnesses affect our communities every day. Change has to happen through our local government. I'm going to fight for that every day when elected to the Senate seat. My top priorities are addressing public safety, advocating for resources to address climate change and storm resiliency, addressing overdevelopment, working to address education disparities, are on my top agenda when I get elected to this seat. As someone who secured millions of dollars in state funding for nonprofits across the state, specifically in our district, I'm working to advocate for those who are neglected by government. And I thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to interview, and I look forward to receiving questions from the group.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bianca. Howard, yes, first with the hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think it's right for an assembly member to withdraw his endorsement from Max Rose because he refused to endorse you?
In that context, it sounds wrong. If you knew the background information, you would have an understanding of why that happened. That was not why the endorsement was rescinded. There were threats that were being made to myself and the assembly member based on my candidacy. You know, no one wanted me to run for the seat. I was told to fall in line and step aside, and I did not plan on doing that. You know, like I said, my goal is to be a voice for my community, and, you know, democracy 101 is that you run primaries. So that rescindment was not based on any endorsement. I think, you know, Max Rose has his own race to run, and I don't see his interest in even getting involved in a primary, specifically a Senate seat primary, because he has his own primary to run. So that was not the basis of that rescindment. The media runs with their own narrative, but the fact of the matter is that's not the reason why that happened. And just for context too, there has been conversations internally where, again, people within the Max Rose camp were acting on their own accord, but specifically making threats to myself and the assemblyman, saying that they were speaking on behalf of Max Rose. But, you know, we recently cleared up the air, and I think Max Rose admitted to wrongdoing on people from his camp and not specifically him. But again, that rescindment was not based on any endorsement towards me.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying some of that. I think Greg has a question. He's curious about who your lobbying clients are.
So primarily focused on nonprofits that provide financial literacy services to public schools. Also work with a lot of nonprofits that provide social services in the district. Some of the largest ones are SEO, Family of Services, work with workforce development nonprofits like the HOPE program to do digital online learning for people who have lost their jobs during the pandemic. And also work with immigrant-based community organizations like the Yemeni American Merchants Associations to advocate for legal services to be provided to people looking for a pathway to citizenship, and then also advocating for small business owners and bodega owners across the city of New York.
Great. Apologies for the feedback that came up there. Great. Dara, question about Space Force or others? Just kidding. Go ahead.
I take no credit for the Space Force question, although I was blamed. I was blamed for it. No, my question is about the revolving door in politics. I asked this question. I support my friend Keith Powers, who is a lobbyist, is now a council member, and I think he's a great one. But I think it's a really fair question about, you worked for an assembly member, now you're a big consulting firm, now you're asking us to send you back to Albany. What are your thoughts on the revolving door in politics and ethics reform?
My thought process is, at the end of the day, we need to fix the hurdles that government presents to the community and local leaders and nonprofits, right? People disparage lobbyists or consultants as, people that funnel in money into the community. But the reality is, if government didn't provide so many hurdles to nonprofits and community leaders, there wouldn't be any lobbyists, right? So that's something that we need to adjust, is actually providing access to community leaders, to government, to mitigate, any third party. And that's what I plan on running on. And that's why I wanted to get back involved, because I see that every day. And like I said, my experience advocating for nonprofits on the ground has given me the voice to advocate for my community. And that's why I want to give back to my hometown.
Thank you. A little zooming into the district a little bit, a few of the other candidates for this seat spoke at length about the BQE as it is a particular of importance to our area. Can you just speak to your thoughts on the future of the BQE and resiliency and that whole bucket of work?
Yeah, so specifically to the BQE, as I think everyone on this call is very much aware, it's deteriorating and falling down as we speak, right? We have to figure out a way, I know the state is getting federal dollars in infrastructure funding to help fund repairs to the BQE, but we also have to come up with a plan to mitigate congestion, right? And alleviate traffic while repairs are being done. And that's something I plan on working with the state to do, being that the funds are already going to be trickled down. In terms of resiliency, there's pockets of Brooklyn and also on Staten Island that are still dealing with recovery from Sandy. And that's unacceptable. And we have to work to address that. And obviously Ida just heightened the fact that we have to adjust the infrastructure when it comes to our catch basins. Also, address infrastructure when it comes to providing seawalls. We've been, advocating for a seawall to be included on the Staten Island end and also on the Coney Island end of Brooklyn. But again, it's a matter of having the voice on the ground to make sure the money gets allocated in a timely manner, right? Because we know the funds are there, but we just need it to actually be allocated on the ground.
Right, allocated before it all falls apart, if possible.
Right.
Great. Any other questions for Bianca while we have her? Susanna, yes, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for coming here. So it just would love a couple of more just policy initiatives that you're focusing on. Like, for example, do you support single payer healthcare or universal childcare? Are there any bills that you're really going to tackle if they aren't passed this year? And just curious if there's any other issues in the district that you're going to be focusing on besides the BQE. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great question. In terms of legislative priorities, one of my biggest focal points that I want to address is providing mental health services on the ground. And even though that's a budgetary ask, we also have to pass legislation that includes families in the process. Like I said, as someone with a mother who suffered from schizophrenia and thoughts disorder, I remember growing up and watching my mom getting pulled out of my home every single year because she couldn't stay on her medication, right? We're dealing with a population that they don't believe that something is wrong with them, right? But the families are getting shut out by the government, by the system, because obviously everyone has their own rights, but we have to include families in the process because it affects us, right? Thank God I had a village around me that helped to support me and my family, but we have to address, including families in the process, and that's done through legislation. In terms of universal childcare, was that a question? Was that a point?
Yeah, I was also curious your position on the single payer bill, which is universal healthcare in New York.
In terms of Gottfried's bill for the single payer healthcare stance, I'm in support of the notion. I think we need to go revisit the legislation in terms of wording behind it, but I'm in support of the state having its own system in place, but also open to hearing from stakeholders on the ground, because there are a lot of insurance companies who, we have to figure out a way to mitigate, but that also there's people who want options, right? So that's a priority of mine, to hear from stakeholders on the ground to figure out a solution.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions from members? We have a bit of time, so feel free to, don't hold back. I will keep asking my questions, but I know it's not the me show, it's the we show. Let's see. So I know it's early on, but have you received any endorsements that you think voters might understand your values through about more? That was not well phrased. Have you received any endorsements that speak to your values, really?
So far I've received local endorsements from elected officials, specifically Assemblymember Kenny Burgos from the Bronx, Assemblymember Danielle Donald, Assemblywoman Inez Dinkins, who has been in the legislature for a number of years, also known as the Queen of Harlem, and also Assemblymember Charles Fall, whose district is basically the bulk of the Senate district, specifically on Staten Island. In terms of local endorsements, I'm going to actually be rolling out some local coalitions who are getting behind me. Again, primarily focused on providing immigration services, specifically legal services to the community, and I will be rolling out those coalition endorsements within the next few days.
Awesome, we'll keep our eyes peeled for those. Danielle, yes.
Hey, and I'm only speaking again because no one else is stepping up. Aside from the BQE and some of the other things you mentioned, what do you perceive as some of the primary issues facing the district? And we talked about how it's a very, disparate district with a lot of different parts. What do you think are some of the major issues?
Major issue is really COVID recovery, right? It's for our small businesses. We have a lot of small business owners in the district. And yes, the federal government provided PPP loans, and also we had some hospitality funds that were allocated through the state, but we really have to, figure out how to get resources to small businesses who do not have the resources or don't have the access to government, right? And that's going to definitely be a priority of mine, is really getting funding back to our hospitality industry and also our small businesses, because they are the backbones of our district and our state as a whole. So that's going to be a top priority of mine.
That's great. I know a lot of businesses all over the borough and the city could use that help in these days. All right, any other questions for Bianca? Okay, here, and thank you so much for introducing yourself to the club. And just as a reminder, Bianca Raj Prasad will be on the ballot for New York's 23rd Senate District. And ballots will be emailed out when we go into our breakout room in a little bit. Thank you again, Bianca. Great, okay, we have just a minute before we hear from our next candidate, but just a quick shout out, because I saw our district leader endorsee for the female seat has joined us. Hi, Cheryl, good to see you. And I believe Seamus Campbell, our district leader endorsee for the male seat, has joined us as well. Seamus, welcome, and thank you in advance for directing traffic to the breakout rooms. I hope you're on and able to help me with that soon. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, I need help with that. Anyway, thank you both, and all of our endorsees who are joining us again tonight. And more endorsees will be made by the end of this evening. Okay, so switching gears again back to the congressional level. Next up, we'll be hearing from Brittany Ramos de Barros for a candidate for Congressional District 11, which, as a reminder, is the Republican-held Nicole Malliotakis seat, which encompasses Staten Island and now a good chunk of the 52nd Assembly District. So, Brittany, I believe I saw that you joined. Feel free to unmute yourself and spend about 3 minutes introducing yourself. Danielle will be our timekeeper, so keep your eyes peeled for her time signs. I don't see you.
I'm here.
I saw you before. Oh, there you are. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Yeah, feel free to introduce yourself to the club.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having me tonight. I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to present to you. My name is Brittany Ramos de Barros. I'm a proud Staten Islander, combat veteran, and organizer who has been working on social justice issues and movement for several years. But I've had a long journey that I think a lot of people can see themselves in to get to this place. I was raised in a conservative military family. My parents really instilled in me a love for the values that we say this country is supposed to be about: opportunity and service and equality. But I'm also biracial, and I could see with my own eyes at a young age that the America that my white family was living in was just not the same as the America that my Black and Puerto Rican family experienced. And my parents also promoted this beautiful notion that if you worked hard enough, anyone could make it. But I watched my parents work multiple jobs, work incredibly hard, families all around us the same. And we were still always getting notifications that we were going to get kicked out of our home, or our church friends bringing us groceries just so that we could eat dinner. And I knew that something didn't seem to add up. I ended up going to school on an Army scholarship to the University of Miami. And I started my first business at 18 and ran that business out of my dorm room and out of 4 states successfully. By the time I graduated in 2011, I commissioned as an Army officer and became a platoon leader responsible for 40 lives with deployment orders in hand to Afghanistan. And at that time, I was a true believer. I thought I was going to go help fight for freedom and protect the Afghan people, but it was devastating to see with my own eyes the way that we were really adding to the violence. It seemed like, despite, good intentions that I would see sometimes, doing a lot more harm than good, and the way that corporations also seem to be really running the show. And I came home feeling betrayed and hurt and confused about what I had participated in. I think I had an unfulfilled hunger to serve still. And so rather than going back to business, I kind of continued in the reserves and got my first nonprofit job working on multi-million-dollar cross-sector economic development projects in large cities across the country that were efforts to address racial equity gaps in jobs, incomes, and income and wealth, and just learned an incredible amount about our economic and political structures through that experience. I got to work with every level of government, from the Federal Reserve banks all the way down to city councils all over the country. I really started to see the ways that we need to shift some of our core logics and structures in order to make sure that our systems are actually creating pathways for opportunities for people, rather than contributing to cycles of poverty and trauma and violence in our communities. I ended up speaking out about the wars, and when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, I was really inspired and realized I had power in my voice as a veteran to connect the dots between endless war profiteering and the need for investment in constructive things like education and healthcare and protecting the environment in our own communities. I got involved with the Poor People's Campaign. Have been doing organizing work ever since, until folks in my community asked me to run. And we have been building an exciting grassroots campaign with a lot of momentum for the last year that I'm excited to tell you more about.
That's great. Thank you so much. And so respectful of our time. That was wonderful. And you have such an interesting background. And thank you for your service. Okay, opening it up for questions. And again, as Danielle hinted at, feel free to not hold back. Let's ask some questions for some new faces for our final 2 candidates of the evening. But first, Howard, go ahead.
All right, a couple of foreign policy questions. 1, do you support sanctions against Russia? And 2, do you support the BDS movement?
Yeah, so I believe in the First Amendment. I'm always—
That's not what I asked. I asked what you thought. We all support the First Amendment here. We all think people have a right to join the BDS movement.
Yeah, so to be clear, I would support any efforts to protect people's rights to participate in the BDS movement. And I think that it is something that should be protected. And I wouldn't support legislation to curb people's participation. And, and I do believe that It's righteous for people whose human rights are being impacted to stand up for their rights. And I think
But where
that
do you
I am a
stand?
person who champions human rights all over the world. I think that not just in Israel, but also here in the United States and all over the world, we have a responsibility to stand up alongside people who are struggling for their rights. And I am a person who is always going to stand with all peoples who are doing that. To your first question on sanctions, I do not believe that blanket sanctions across general populations are an effective measure, such as Cuba, Venezuela, other examples that we're seeing.
So you
that
support
ultimately-
human rights, but not in the Ukraine.
Let's make sure that she has the ability to answer the question. Howard, please. Go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah. So the question is not, do I believe that some form of intervention should be had in the Ukraine? The question is, do I support sanctions? And to answer your question, I'm saying that I think that blanket sanctions are a human rights violation. They often end up hurting civilian populations far more than they are effective at curbing political despots or dictators or people who are being aggressors in foreign policy situations. As far as individually targeted sanctions, I think on a case-by-case basis, we've seen evidence that that can be effective and justified. And so I think that when I think about foreign policy, I think about centering diplomacy and leading with diplomacy, rooting our ability to mutually assured cooperation rather than destruction in our ability to create strong bonds that cultivate peace. But I also understand as a person who spent time in a war zone that I'm not a pacifist. I think that there are times when military action is necessary, but I also believe that, we have overly relied on military action to our own detriment and to our own national security crisis. And we need to reframe that and we need to shift that. And I will be an advocate for that in Congress.
Great, thank you. Let's move towards more district-centered questions. Steve, a hand from Steve Wagner. Go ahead.
Hey, my hair's a little crazy. In the sun in days. So my question is, so I mean, there's going to be a lot of momentum again with Max Rose in the race again, who formerly held the seat. And so my question is, how do you compete with that in terms of his name recognition and additionally his ability to fundraise? Because I'm reading right now, I just Googled it real quick. He raised 7.8 million in the last cycle. He lost. So, there's that. So how do you deal with that contention? And is your calculations influenced by the fact that the district has changed now? For example, I will be one of your constituents, and I am not a Staten Islander for sure.
Yeah, that's exciting. Thank you for that question. Simply put, I think that obviously we need to raise enough to be competitive. We have held our own. We've raised over $500,000 in grassroots contributions without corporate PAC money. The momentum is already picking up this quarter, which is exciting to see with the new district lines. But also we know from the evidence at this point in this district that if out fundraising your opponent was enough, we would have a different representative in this seat right now. And I would argue that, while Max Rose certainly has name recognition and money on me, he also has a lot of baggage that I would argue cost him this last election. There were a lot of communities that worked really hard in 2018 to come together and to get him elected, including myself, who knocked doors for him out of a sense of determination to advance the needs of the party and everyday people and do what was pragmatic for our communities in order to do that. And what we saw was someone who abandoned a lot of us who got him elected in order to pander to Trump Republicans, running multiple pro-Trump ads, making decisions that really alienated the robust Democratic base, even the more conservative Democrats sometimes in the district. And so that is a reality, I think, by the numbers that a lot of people who haven't been deep in New York 11 politics for a really long time aren't always fully aware of, is that name recognition only helps you to the extent that it's a positive impression. For myself, that's also why we started early. I think it's important to be pragmatic and humble about what we're up against. That's why we launched a year ago. We have knocked doors, registered voters, and signed up volunteers weekly since April. Through that effort, we've already signed up over 500 volunteers, put over 200 volunteers through training, and have a significant field operation that has only continued to grow significantly. We've also surveyed hundreds of community members across the political spectrum about their priorities and their positioning on controversial issues in the district so that we could have a data-based assessment, even if, informal, of, that kind of challenges some of the assumptions about where people in Staten Island are on issues and what their actual priorities are, because there hasn't been enough data collected about that. And there haven't been a lot of assumptions challenged when you think about the fact that Max has never had to face a significant viable Democratic challenge. And I think that that's something that people forget until now. And so when we look at all of that and we look at the numbers of the new district, we see that 58% of the triple prime voters now come from the Brooklyn side of the district. We always believed that we could win this district even if the line stayed the same. There are double the number of Democrats almost in this district compared to Republicans, and we have a real turnout problem. While certainly a percentage of those Democrats are Democrats in name only, it is just not a disciplined assessment of the data when we look at the fact that the Democratic primary in 2018 had 11% turnout, rounding up, to say that approximately 90% of registered Democrats in the district are not turning out simply because they're conservatives and Democrats in name only. I think we have a real crisis of excitement and faith and emphasis in actually organizing and engaging our own base that has persisted for a lengthy amount of time, particularly because Democrats have only run to the right, sometimes to the right of their Republican opponents, as we saw with Max in certain cases. So I think that we have to be, we have a real opportunity. We had a real opportunity here when we look at the kinds of Georgia-style heavy field organizing strategies that we have emulated in our approach. And with the new district, and like I said, the 58% of triple prime voters on the Brooklyn side, 40% of those voters voted for Alexa Aviles and Shahana Hanif. We also have a head start on voter IDs in Staten Island that no one else has in this race, because we have done the hard work of coalition and relationship building. We've collected 5,000 IDs from Amoy Barnes, 4,000 IDs from Ranti Ogunleye, two progressive second and third runner-up candidates on the North Shore, the most heavily Democratic, high turnout area of Staten Island. That's a combined 9,000 voter IDs, although there is some overlap. 5,000 voter IDs from Olivia, who ran for city council on the South Shore. A significant number, although I forgot the exact number, from Lori Honor, who was the runner-up and the progressive in the race for the borough president race. 5,500 IDs from Father Herrera Yatim, city council race in Bay Ridge, 25,000 from Shahana Hanif, 2,500 from Shahana Massoum, and another 7,700 from Jazzy Robinson, both ran against each other in the district leader race here in Staten Island. And so that is a significant head start in terms of identifying in a rigorous and disciplined way the progressive leaning voters on the Staten Island side, and also all the way up through the Brooklyn side of the district, that we are, as a campaign by organizers, including me, are really well positioned with the field operation to execute on those numbers and to convert them into the win number that we estimate we need for this primary of 31,000.
Great. Wow, you're very numbers oriented, which I appreciate. That was very cool to see. Want to make sure we get a couple more questions in for you. Joe, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi. One of the two phrases that have been winners for the Republicans are defund the police and critical race theory. And I know Nicole probably got a lot of votes on those two phrases. How do you've talked about working with the progressives, that's great, but how do you get the message to people who might have voted for Nicole based on those two phrases? What would you tell them? Let me put it that way. You're in a meeting and someone says, you just want to take all the money. You want to defund the police and do critical race theory in our schools.
Yeah, well, and I want to be clear that I was talking about a head start in progressive voter IDs, but our campaign is really, something that we talk about a lot is that it's not really about left versus right. It's about top versus bottom. We orient ourselves to kind of inclusive populist rhetoric that is very popular in Staten Island, as we've seen through the very, strong popularity of Bernie Sanders in Staten Island that a lot of people don't realize exists. And so, I just want to clarify that. And I take a similar, very just honest, grounded approach to answering questions like this. I think that when Democrats have run from this, it is part of what has cost us is, our attempt to kind of frankly pussyfoot around and be like, oh, well, yes, but no. And people feel really dissatisfied and really scared, right? It fuels these fears that people have. We've allowed for them to become fear mongered and amplified in the way that they have. And what I say to people is, look, we've allowed these people, these, frankly, political elites who don't actually care about our communities and the violence we're facing that we agree on. We want safe communities. That's the common ground we have. And we've allowed these people to turn this into a question of loving cops or hating cops. To me, that's not the question. The question is, how do we have safe communities? And what role do police have to play in supporting that? Right. And so for me, I know what it feels like to put on a uniform every day and to do my best to try to fight violence with a system that ultimately doesn't actually equip you with the tools to do the job that you're being asked to do. And I think in a lot of cases, the parallel mental health rates and rates of suicide that we see in police as well as the military are parallels for a reason, because we are people who are going out there, putting ourselves at risk and willing to sacrifice in a uniform all day, every day. And we're also being set up to fail and abandoned by brass that often care more about their careers and covering their own asses than our ability to actually do that job, when we're seeing the impact and the failures of our ability sometimes to actually stop that violence other than putting a Band-Aid on it or having a reaction to do anything about it. And so the question, when we talk about defund, we have to talk about what we're investing in, right? This is not about taking anything away from anyone. It's about what actually works according to the data, according to the research, according to the empirical evidence to get communities safer. And what we know is that continuing to we're seeing continued crime, and we have one of the largest police forces in the world. So we can't just only keep throwing money at the same solution and think that we're going to have a different answer, right? Or that we're going to have better results. And we know that actually police officers' jobs are not supposed to be to cultivate safety. It's supposed to be to enforce the law. And in order to cultivate safety, we have to invest in housing. We have to invest in education and after-school programs that give youth who are in horrible situations a better opportunity to have a sense of purpose and pathway, right? We need to have career training programs in schools for people who don't want to go to college, but want to sign up for good union jobs and start to have access to well-funded apprenticeships so that unions can also absorb more folks into their unions and into those trades. And we need really these wraparound services and interventions that our schools should be community centers for. And I know that there's great work happening around that at the city and state level, but the federal government also needs to be investing in and creating programs that facilitate these efforts and bolster them. And people who are in leadership roles at the congressional level need to be using their platforms to talk about the importance of addressing safety from the place of healing our fabric in our communities. And that's the way that I'm interested in talking about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. That was really helpful. We're over time for you. I apologize. I see there are a couple questions still raised, but if you're able to stick around in the chat, maybe you can chat with folks. Apologies, Greg and Jason. I saw your hands up, but again, want to be respectful to our next and final candidate. So thank you so much, Brittany, for introducing yourself. Again, as a reminder, Brittany will be running in Congressional District 11 and appear on our ballot this evening. Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you so much again for having me.
Yeah, okay, turning our attention to our final candidate for the evening and swinging back over to Senate District 23, we have Sarah Blas on the line. Sarah, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the club. You'll have about 3 minutes, and Danielle will be our timekeeper, so keep an eye out for her signs. And yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. My name is Sarah Blas, and I'm running for the state Senate seat for District 23. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about myself, and as I share my story with you folks, you'll get to know really easily why I'm running. I was actually born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My family, I was very, very privileged to grow up in a family, upper middle class family who were homeowners, who ran nonprofit organizations and churches in Brooklyn. My grandfather, the late Bishop John B. Elliott, really taught me from a very, very early age to talk about things that were very stigmatized in the community. He did so much work at the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in Black and Brown communities, and wasn't afraid to talk about what it means to prevent a public health crisis. My grandmother, who's the current Brooklyn Council Church, runs the current Brooklyn Council of Churches, say that 3 times fast, is also an inspiration to me at 92 years old. She does so much community organizing, so much, it's such an inspiration. So that's really the foundation that I have just growing up about what it means to be a part of the community and what it means to be a community steward. I transitioned to Staten Island about 18 years ago. And in those 18 years, I've worked in nonprofit organizations, both as an employee, a consultant, and a founder and executive director of my own nonprofit organization at the helm of food justice and food sovereignty in Black and Brown communities and Indigenous communities. Currently, I'm actually a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant for government entities and private organizations, really helping to form policies that are equitable and accessible. And I'm also a proud mother of 6 children. 4 out of 6 of them have special needs, and it's one of the reasons why I ran and won my Community Education Council seat, advocating for parents and caregivers for equitable education across Staten Island. Another thing that I love to talk about is being a NYCHA resident. I'm a current NYCHA resident at the Richmond Terrace NYCHA facility in Staten Island. And at the forefront of everything I do is really fighting for safe, equitable, and quality housing. In addition to that, I'm also at the helm of sharing the emergency rental assistance, not only for tenants, but also for landlords, and have proudly connected thousands of families to those resources, both in Brooklyn and Staten Island.
Great, thank you so much. Wow, six kids. I can barely manage my dog. You're doing a great job. All right, opening it up for questions for Sarah. Again, feel free to use the raise hand feature or type a question into the chat. But I will start us off and ask a similar question that I've asked most candidates tonight, but I'm curious about what committees you would be hoping to take the helm of if elected.
Thank you so much. I would really love to take the helm of public safety committees. That's one of the platforms that I'll be talking the most about. And really making sure that it's connected to some of the public health outcomes that we talk so much about. Also, something that is really my bread and butter and something I'm extremely passionate about is housing. As I told you, that it's at the forefront of all that I do. And I really want to make sure that I make an impact in that arena. Excuse me, I have a cough. As much as possible.
Yeah, well, hope you feel better soon. Some hot tea is always helpful. Joanne, go ahead.
Thank you. I started eating, I'm sorry, so I turned off my camera. You know, as a former teacher of the deaf and a disability civil rights lawyer who's worked in the education space for many years, I want to thank you for your work and for being there for your children with disabilities. And being on this Community Education Council, so many times we don't have enough voices of parents of kids with special needs. So thank you very much. Is there any particular education issues that you would like to focus on if you were elected to the state Senate? I assume they're going to be related to special ed, but that's a really big, broad category, as you know. So maybe you could share a little bit of that with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an excellent question. So one of the things that I am really, really excellent at and really passionate about is destigmatizing what it means to have an IEP or an individualized education plan. And Staten Island, the numbers are staggering. We have the highest emotional disturbance category in IEPs. We have the second highest developmental persuasive disorder category, which encompasses those children who are on the autism spectrum disorder. And what I think really needs to be a part of schools are community schools. Let's look at the root cause as why in certain sections and in certain neighborhoods, we see these high spikes in early intervention. We see these high spikes in specific categories. We have to make sure that we're bringing the nonprofit organizations and community resources into the schools and combining that with early intervention to make sure that we're not just preventing it, but we're making sure that these IEPs are encompassing all of the needs within the home and within the community as well. So all of those connections to me are one and the same, and we can't see the outcomes for our children without connecting those dots.
Thank you. And I'm all for moms running for office and bringing that voice, particularly that voice of their kids with special needs to the fore. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanne.
Great. So Susanna asks if there is time, and there is time, a follow-up to public safety. You said it'd be a priority area, but what is your position on the topic? And what would you do differently to address public safety?
Absolutely. So I'm a huge storyteller, so bear with me, okay? So when I first started my community, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sorry, my iPad, these things died, so yes.
Oh, no worries. When I first started my community collective to address food disparities in my community in 2018, we had a community officer come over with a shovel. She brought a hibiscus plant, which happened to be our favorite plant, which we didn't know. And she was digging in the garden, she was planting, and my kids were there, and it was a wonderful experience. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. How great is this to really bring in the community officers to what we're doing with food sovereignty and food justice work in our community. And all of a sudden, my phone started binging and binging and pinging and pinging. And I started getting all of these video footages of me gardening with her. And I started calling back my neighbors and saying, why are you recording these things? And they said, well, we saw someone in uniform with a shovel and we thought that you were going to be attacked. What that showed me is that there is such a huge mistrust in communities, and there are reasons for those mistrusts. And the only way that we can acknowledge those things is if we're beginning to have conversations that are really raw and really honest. Fast forward, we were able to have so many healing circles with a trauma-focused lens, and really make sure that we were bringing not only solutions to the mistrust that we see in communities, but really being able to amplify what works in communities and amplifying community policing. And so I've seen that work in dozens of neighborhoods, especially where it has said that it can't work. And that's something that I want to see replicated, measured, and tracked across Brooklyn and across Staten Island.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more question. And Greg, you asked a question in the chat, but do you want to unmute and ask yourself, or I can painfully read it?
No, sure, that's fine. Thank you. And thanks for joining us. How would you use your office to demand reorganization of the New York City DOE? It's a bloated bureaucracy that routinely misappropriates the public dollar, and the kids are not served by this approach to funding public education. I could speak from experience. So how would you like to prioritize special education, and what specifically would you like to see? You had referenced alarmingly early diagnoses in specific districts. Is that an example of something you'd like to mitigate?
That's a perfect example of something that I would like to mitigate. And I think that it starts with tracking early intervention. It starts with really making sure that we're funding, again, the root causes of these things. My work in public health, I saw that how important it was to get education, to get proper housing, to really begin to fund people when they're discovering that they either are pregnant or are trying to become pregnant. And we've got to understand how the community problems and the unhealthy built environment is linked to these developmental disabilities. So that's something that I would love to see.
Thank you very much.
Great. Awesome. Any last questions for Sarah? We are amazingly almost exactly on schedule, which is mind-blowing to me. But time for a question? No, don't want to ruin it. Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining.
Just
yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for coming, Sarah. I guess one question I have is why the state legislature is the right office. You know, we went through a bunch of council elections recently. We have a bunch of people running for Congress. Can you talk a little bit about why state senate is the right office?
Absolutely. So as a state senator, the main job is to draft and to revise policy to make the biggest impact in the community. And I believe that you have to have a combination of not just professional expertise, but lived experiences to know what policies are going to make the biggest impact. I personally talk about my lived experience all the time, and I reference specific policies that are just pieces of paper with people's signatures on them. And then when you walk into the community block by block, you see that it's not being implemented. And I think the nuance, what is missing, that missing puzzle piece is that lived experience that's not being brought to the table. And I'm honestly really excited that, you know, we can lift other people's lived experiences more than just case studies, more than just things that we read about and tokenize, but really begin to infuse them into policies and implementation of those policies.
Well said. Awesome. All right. Thank you again, Sarah, for introducing yourself to the club. As a reminder, Sarah will be running on in the 23rd Senate District, and she will appear on our ballot, which we will be sending out shortly. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you again. It was such a pleasure being here with you all this evening. Have a good night.
Thank you. And thank you to all our candidates. All 11 of you were amazing. We stayed on track, on time, very proud of ourselves, big pat on our back. And thank you to all the candidates for sharing your stories and answering all of our sometimes tough questions. So that concludes our candidate forum for the evening. The next part of the evening, we will be moving all IND eligible voters to a breakout room. As I mentioned, Seamus will be helping us move everyone over. And once everyone's in the breakout room, there will be nobody in the main room. So the only folks that will be left are candidates, because you're not allowed into the private discussion or guests. So thank you for joining us. I saw some new faces on today's Zoom. I think at next month's general meeting, we'll have some time to introduce the new folks a little bit more. So look forward to that. Our next general meeting is St. Patrick's Day, I believe, Thursday, March 17th. So maybe we can have some special treats. I don't know. Maybe we'll be joined by some fun leprechauns, who's to say. But that is the next general meeting. And of course, our executive board meetings are open to the public, and they're now on the IND calendar. So you can visit indbrooklyn.org and stay up to date with all of those meetings, though you're not required to attend those. Barbara, I see your hand raised. Do you have a question? No? Okay, maybe it was just a mistake, but if you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. Okay, thank you again to everyone for sticking through us.